Welcome back. Hey, my dear friends, close your eyes. Now open them. You're standing in Morocco, 300,000 years ago, right in front of you, something impossible. 7 different species of humans gathered together at a single water source. Some have skulls that bulge backward. Others barely reach your waist. One towers above you, packed with muscle that would shame any bodybuilder. Behind them, yellow eyes watch from the shadows a short-faced bear as tall as a basketball hoop, waiting for the weakest to drift away from the group. This isn't fantasy. This actually happened. For one brief moment in Earth's history, 7 human species shared this planet with monsters that would make your worst nightmares look like house pets. One of those species was us, Homo sapiens. We were the scrawniest, the weakest, the least likely to survive. And yet every other human species and every giant that stalked them is now gone. How? Why? The answer is written in blood, bone, and the kind of survival story Hollywood couldn't invent if it tried. Welcome to Earth's greatest murder mystery, where everyone's a suspect and everyone's a victim except us. The water hole at Jebel Uhud reflected stars that no human man eyes have seen for 300 millennia. But tonight, it reflected something else. Faces. 7 different kinds of human faces, all thirsty, all weary, all real. The Neanderthals arrived first, as they always did. Muscles rippled beneath pale skin as they moved with the confidence of apex predators. Their massive skulls held brains larger than yours, 1,750 cubic centimeters of cold, adapted intelligence. They'd owned Europe for 200,000 years. This was just another night, until it wasn't. From the east came shadows that moved wrong, too tall, too thin, Denisovans, though no one would call them that for another 299,700 years, had walked here from the Altai Mountains. Their genes carried secrets that would one day let Tibetans breathe where others suffocate. Tonight, they just wanted water. The Homo erectus family approached from the south, and even the Neanderthals tensed. These were the old ones, the originals. They'd been walking the earth for 1.7 million years, while everyone else was still theoretical. Their technology was outdated, their brains smaller, but they'd survived ice ages that killed everything else. Respect was automatic. Then came the impossible ones.
Homo naledi from south.
In Africa. With brains no bigger than a chimp's, but hands that crafted tools with disturbing precision. They shouldn't exist. Every theory said big brains meant survival. Yet here they stood proof that science would spend centuries being wrong. Dragging primitive spears, a band of Homo heidelbergensis emerged from the northern darkness. The ancestors, the ones who gave birth to both Neanderthals and sapiens. Looking at them was like looking at your own grandfather's grandfather, multiplied by 10,000. From the island forests came the smallest, Homo floresiensis, the hobbits, 3.5 feet tall. They'd hunted miniature elephants with miniature spears on their miniature island. But there was nothing miniature about their survival skills. They'd outlast almost everyone here. And finally, trembling, came us, Homo sapiens, fresh from our African cradle, with our weird flat faces and bubble-shaped skulls. We had no muscles like the Neanderthals, no ancient wisdom like Erectus, no size advantage, no special adaptations, no reason for confidence. But we had something else, something invisible, something that would kill every other human at this waterhole. We had ideas that spread like viruses. We had language that painted pictures in other minds. We had the ability to believe in things that didn't exist: gods, spirits, tomorrow's hunt, next season's gathering. We could convince others to die for ideas. We were weakest in body, but we were contagious in thought. The waterhole was silent, except for careful sipping. 7 species, 1 planet. The mathematical probability of this moment was so small that astronomers would call it impossible. Yet, here they were.
Here we were.
In the shadows beyond the firelight, Smilodon watched with professional interest. The saber-toothed cat had no preference for which human species it ate. Meat was meat, but but it noticed something the humans didn't. Only one species looked at the stars while drinking. Only one species drew patterns in the mud. Only one species was already planning tomorrow while surviving tonight. The cat didn't know it was watching the future. It only knew that these strange apes were easier to hunt when they were thinking about something else. By dawn, 7 species would scatter back to their territories. In 50,000 years, 6 would be extinct. But tonight, for one perfect moment, humanity was a rainbow of possibilities gathered at a waterhole under stars that would never see such diversity again. Marcus Aurelius wrote that what we fear in death is merely the loss of sensation. He never met Arctodus Simus. The short-faced bear didn't kill for hunger. It killed for territory, and its territory was everything it could see, smell, or imagine. Standing 11 feet tall on hind legs and weighing 2,900 pounds of muscle and rage, it was North America's undisputed king. When it walked, the ground trembled. When it ran 40 miles per hour across open terrain, nothing escaped. Dr. Paul Mathias spent his life studying Arctodus bones. This wasn't just a big bear, he told colleagues at the University of Alaska. This was evolution's experiment in pure, terrifying efficiency. Longer legs than any bear alive. A skull built for bone crushing. Intelligence that let it memorize every water source in 1,000 square mile territory. The first humans to cross Beringia 23,000 years ago didn't have paleontology degrees. They had something better. Raw, bowel-loosening terror that kept them alive. The Clovis people left us their nightmares carved in stone cave art showing bears that towered over moths, surrounded by human figures the size of insects. But one trackway tells the real story. White Sands, New Mexico, 20,000 years ago. A woman carrying a toddler walks across mudflats. Her footprints show she's hurrying, stride length increasing, toes digging deep for purchase. Behind her, offset by hours, come prints that make archaeologists' blood run cold. Arctodus tracks, following patiently. She knew it was there, says Dr. Sally Reynolds, who led the excavation. The footprints show her changing direction repeatedly, doubling back, trying to confuse her trail. She was using evasion techniques we see in modern prey animals. But Arctodus wasn't just any predator. The bear's intelligence was its most terrifying feature. Unlike modern bears that rely on brute force, Arctodus played chess. Fossil sites show evidence of ambush hunting bears waiting near water sources, in box canyons, along known migration routes. They understood patterns. They remembered individuals. One skull from Nebraska bears. Human tool marks desperate cuts where someone tried to harvest meat from a bear they'd found dead or thought was dead. The human skeleton found 16 feet away, spines snapped like kindle. NG suggests otherwise. Playing dead was an Arctodus specialty, lying motionless for hours, waiting for scavengers, then exploding into violence. Wolves learned to wait days before approaching an Arctodus corpse. Humans had to learn faster, or join the fossil record. But here is the mystery that haunts paleontologists. Arctodus vanished, just as humans flourished in North America. Climate change, possibly loss of prey, maybe. But the timing is suspicious. Right when humans developed better projectile weapons, the giant bears disappeared. We like to think we hunted them to extinction, Mathias says. But the truth is probably scarier. I think we learned to avoid them so perfectly, live in the spaces between their territories, that when climate changed their food sources, we'd already taken all the backup options. We didn't kill them with spears. We killed them with superior planning. The last Arctodus died alone, probably confused why the world had suddenly emptied of prey. It never understood that hairless apes had redirected entire herds, controlled water sources, turned the landscape into a human chessboard where giants had no moves left. Today, hikers in Montana occasionally report seeing impossibly large bears. Science dismisses these as misidentified grizzlies, but Native American tribes remember differently. They have words for the giant bear that translate roughly to the one who owns the earth. They also have protocols passed down 10,000 years for what to do if you see one. Run is not on the list, because you can't outrun something that was built to catch you. You can only outthink it if you're human enough. The insult was genetic. While Neanderthals benched 500 pounds and Denisovans conquered Himalayan heights, the first Homo sapiens in Morocco 300,000 years ago were built like marathon runners who'd forgotten to eat. Our ancestors were the 98-pound weaklings on a planet of bodybuilders. Dr. Jean-Jacques Hublin holds the evidence in his hands. A sapien skull from Jebel Irhoud, paper-thin compared to the thick fortresses other humans called heads. "Look at this," he says, rotating the fossil under laboratory lights. "You could crack this skull with a firm handshake. Neanderthal skulls. You'd need a sledgehammer." The numbers are embarrassing. Neanderthal muscle attachment points show biceps that could snap our arms like twigs. Their grip strength A. Verage 260 pounds, enough to crush a modern human's hand during a friendly greeting. One Neanderthal from Shanidar Cave had a humerus thicker than a baseball bat. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens looked like we'd been designed by committee during a budget crisis. Our teeth were Joksteiny kernels compared to H. heidelbergensis molars that could crack bones. Our jaws were so weak we needed to cook food just to chew it. Our body hair had vanished, leaving us naked in a world where winter meant death. We couldn't see as well as Erectus, couldn't smell as well as Neanderthals, couldn't hear as well as Floresiensis. If you held a prehistoric Olympics, says Dr. Chris Stringer from London's Natural History Museum, Homo sapiens would come in dead last in every physical event, running, throwing, fighting. Everyone else was better equipped. We were the species voted most likely to go extinct. The Moroccan fossils tell a story of desperate adaptation. Cut marks on animal bones show sapiens were scavengers sneaking bites from carcasses after real predators finished. We see evidence of them cracking bones for marrow, not because it was delicious, but because every other human species had already claimed. Ed, the good parts. One juvenile skeleton shows signs of repeated malnutrition. Growth lines in the teeth start and stop like a crashed computer trying to reboot. This child survived multiple famines that would have killed them today, but survived into what? A world where Neanderthal children were learning to hunt mammoths, while sapiens children were learning to hide. The early sapiens toolkit is almost pitifully basic compared to contemporaries. While Neanderthals crafted elaborate levallois points, we were still figuring out which end of the rock to hold. Our camps were smaller, simpler, sadder. We built fires that Neanderthals would have laughed at, tiny things that barely warmed one side while the other froze. But then, around 280,000 years ago, something strange appears in the archaeological record. Mistakes, lots of them. Failed tool designs, experimental hafting, bizarre items with no clear purpose. While other species perfected techniques over millennia, sapiens were failing faster than everyone else. Our camps are littered with broken experiments, abandoned ideas, tools that make no sense. It's like looking at Thomas Edison's garbage, Hublin notes. 99 failures for every success. Access. Other species found what worked and stuck with it for 100,000 years. Sapiens couldn't stick with anything for 100 days. We see evidence of sapiens trying to copy Neanderthal tools badly, attempting Denisovan high-altitude strategies and failing, mimicking Erectus persistence hunting and collapsing from exhaustion. We were the species that couldn't do anything right except learn from being wrong. Each failed tool taught us what didn't work. Each botched hunt showed us what to avoid. Each dead sapiens became a lesson for the living. We didn't have strength, so we developed strategy. We couldn't fight, so we learned to think. We couldn't survive alone, so we built networks that spanned continents. The weak muscles that couldn't throw spears hard enough led to the invention of the atlatl, a lever that multiplied force. The pathetic teeth that couldn't chew raw meat led to controlled fire and cooking. The naked skin that couldn't handle cold led to fitted clothing and shelters. Every weakness became a catalyst for innovation. Homo sapiens, Stringer concludes, were evolution's most successful failures. We failed our way to global domination. The strong don't need to change. On, like the weak, evolve. For 200,000 years before we learned to tie our shoes, Neanderthals ruled Europe with biceps and brains. Forget the knuckle-dragging stereotype. These were the Romans of the Paleolithic, and their empire stretched from Spain to Siberia. La Chapelle-aux-Saints, France, 1908. When archaeologists first reconstructed a Neanderthal skeleton, they made him hunched and stupid-looking. Small problem. The skeleton had severe arthritis. They'd literally built their prejudice around a disabled elder who'd been cared for by his community for years. The real Neanderthals stood straight, proud, and could bench press your refrigerator. Everything we thought we knew was wrong. Admits Dr. Paula Villa from the University of Colorado. These weren't primitive brutes. They were apex predators with table manners. The evidence is overwhelming. Neanderthal sites from 300,000 years ago show controlled use of fire, organized living spaces with designated areas for sleeping, cooking, and tool-making. They didn't just live in caves, they engineered them. At Bruniqual Cave, they built mysterious circular structures from stalagmites 176,000 years ago, 300 feet underground, lit only by torch. Chairs they carried into perfect darkness.
Why?
We have no idea. But you don't build monuments in the dark unless you have fire mastery and bigger thoughts than mere survival. Their technology was devastating. The level war technique, a method of stone knapping so complex that modern archaeologists need weeks of training to replicate it poorly, was standard Neanderthal kindergarten. They created stone tools pre-designed in their minds, visualizing the final product inside raw rock, like Michelangelo seeing David in marble. One spear point from Germany shows microwear patterns, indicating it was resharpened 17 times. 17th. These weren't disposable tools. They were maintained, cherished, passed down. Some points show evidence of hafting with birch tar, a glue they manufactured by heating bark in oxygen-free environments, a process requiring precise temperature control and chemical knowledge. But the real Neanderthal advantage was muscle. Shanidar Cave revealed a Neanderthal who'd survived having his arm amputated, not surgically removed, torn off, probably by a cave bear. He lived for years afterward, his bones showing he was cared for, fed, protected. His remaining arm developed massive competition. N. Sattery muscles one arm, and he was still stronger than any sapiens athlete. Their hunting strategy was simple. Get close and hit hard. While wimpy sapiens were developing throwing spears and running away, Neanderthals were tackling mammoths, rodeo cowboys with stone-tipped spears, riding wounded prey into the ground. Bone breaks in Neanderthal skeletons match modern rodeo injury patterns, except these cowboys were hunting elephants. They owned territories like nations. Isotope analysis of Neanderthal teeth shows some individuals never traveled more than 20 miles from birth, while others show seasonal movements of hundreds of miles following herds with GPS precision. They knew every cave, every water source, every ambush site in territories larger than modern European countries, and they decorated themselves perforated shells, eagle talons, mineral pigments. Neanderthals wore jewelry 50,000 years before sapiens figured out pants. They buried their dead with flowers, food, tools for the afterlife. They cared for their injured, their elderly, their disabled. They even had art hand stencils in Spanish caves dated to 66,000 years ago, 20,000 years before sapiens reached Europe. Abstract. Patterns that might be calendars, maps, or poetry we'll never decode. They painted because something in their massive brains needed beauty. So why aren't you reading this in Neanderthalish? Because empires built on muscle face one fatal flaw. When the game changes, strength becomes stubbornness. Neanderthals perfected close combat hunting for 200,000 years. When climate shifted and prey thinned out, they kept using the same tactics. Get close, hit hard. Sapiens too weak for close combat, invented projectiles, atlatls, bows. We killed from distances Neanderthals considered cowardly. By the time they realized the rules had changed, we'd already taken their territories, their prey, and 2.5% of their DNA. The last Neanderthal died 40,000 years ago in Gibraltar, looking across waters toward Africa, where strange, weak humans kept appearing with new weapons and incomprehensible ideas. He was stronger than any sapiens who ever lived. It didn't matter. In evolution, as in empire, adaptation beats domination every time. They left us 3 teeth, a finger bone, and a genetic ghost story that rewrote human history. The Denisovans were evolution's nomads, spreading from frozen Siberia to Tropy. Cow islands, adapting to environments that would kill other humans, then vanishing so completely we didn't know they existed until 2010. The story starts in Denisova Cave, Siberia, where 300,000 years ago, 3 human species used the same shelter like a prehistoric Airbnb. Neanderthals booked spring and fall. Denisovans preferred winter. Homo sapiens showed up fashionably late, 45,000 years ago, probably complaining about the previous tenants. The finger bone was so small we almost threw it away, admits Dr. Svante Pääbo, who led the team that discovered Denisovan DNA. It looked like nothing, just another cave fragment. Then we sequenced it and realized we'd found an entirely new branch of humanity. The genetic revelation was staggering. Denisovans split from Neanderthals around 400,000 years ago, then went on walkabout across Asia. But unlike their muscle-bound cousins who stuck to familiar territories, Denisovans adapted to everything. Frozen tundra, no problem Himalayan peaks, bring it on tropical rainforests. Perfect. Modern Tibetans can thank a Denisovan for their ability to thrive above 13,000 feet. The EPA's one gene variant that prevents altitude sickness, allowing Tibetans to live where others suffocate, came directly from Denisovan interbreeding. One ancient hookup, 40,000 years of high-altitude advantage. But here's where it gets weird. Melanesians carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA, the highest percentage of any modern population. These tropical island dwellers inherited more ghost genes than Siberians living where Denisovans were discovered. The math only works if Denisovans reached Southeast Asia and started island hopping like prehistoric Vikings. They were everywhere and nowhere, says Dr. Murray Cox from Massey University. We find their genes from the Arctic to the equator, but barely any fossils. It's like trying to reconstruct a civilization from 3 receipts and a grocery list. The receipts tell wild stories. That finger bone belonged to a girl who lived 72,000 years ago. Genetic analysis shows her parents were from completely different Denisovan populations groups that had been separated for 300,000 years, more genetic distance than between modern humans and Neanderthals. Yet they met, mated, and produced a daughter in a Siberian cave. Denisovan DNA reveals at least 3 distinct populations: Siberian mountain dwellers, Southeast Asian, lowlanders, and a mysterious third group that modern Papuans descend from. Each adapted to radically different environments, each invisible in the fossil record, each contributing unique genes to modern humans. The Dragon Man skull from China might be our first look at a Denisovan face massive, robust, with a brain larger than ours. But even that's disputed. We know more about their sex lives than their faces. They interbred with everyone: Neanderthals, sapiens, and probably species we haven't discovered yet. One Siberian cave yielded Denny, a 90,000-year-old teenager with a Neanderthal mother and Denisovan father, first-generation hybrid. Her existence proves these weren't rare accidents, but regular occurrences. The Pleistocene scene was less Game of Thrones and more Love, actually, with bigger foreheads. But Denisovan technology remains frustratingly invisible. No distinctive tool tradition, no characteristic art, just genetic breadcrumbs, suggesting they were everywhere, adapting to everything, leaving almost nothing behind. The ultimate prehistoric minimalists. Their true innovation might have been flexibility itself. While Neanderthals perfected one lifestyle and sapiens kept existing. Riminting, Denisovans simply adapted. New environment, new genes, new challenges, new solutions. They were evolutions, jazz musicians, improvising survival across impossible ranges. So why did they vanish? Maybe they didn't. When scientists look at modern human genetics, they find Denisovan contributions everywhere. Immune system variants, metabolic adaptations, genes for processing fats, managing blood sugar, fighting parasites. We absorbed them so completely that extinction might be the wrong word. They didn't disappear. They dissolved into us. Their bodies are gone, but their genes live on in a billion people who've never heard their name. The ghost people became ghosts in our cells, haunting our DNA with adaptations we're still discovering. Every time a Tibetan climbs Everest without oxygen, a Denisovan smiles from 50,000 years ago. Evolution's ultimate vanishing act, becoming invisible by becoming essential. Not bad for 3 teeth and a finger bone. Liang Bua Cave, Flores Island, Indonesia, 50,000 years ago. The last Homo floresiensis watches the ocean, knowing something is wrong. The dragons are acting strange. The stegodons, miniature elephants her people hunted for 900,000 years, are clustering near water, trumpeting warnings in frequencies that make her teeth ache. She stands 3 feet 6 inches tall. In your world, she'd shop in the children's section. In hers, she's an apex predator who brings down elephants with coordinated precision. Her brain is smaller than a chimpanzee's, but she controls fire, crafts complex tools, and navigates an island that would kill you in days. Homo floresiensis shouldn't exist, says Dr. Dean Falk, who studied their brain structure. Every rule says bigger brains equal survival. They break every rule successfully for almost 1 million years. The Hobbit scientists hate the nickname, but can't stop using it. Arrived on Flores when it was connected to mainland Asia. Then sea levels rose, stranding them on an island with limited resources. Evolution's solution: shrink everything: bodies, brains, prey, predators. Even the Komodo dragons were smaller than, though still lethal enough to encourage careful walking. But floresiensis didn't just shrink, they optimized. Their tools show sophisticated reduction sequences, taking large stone cores and systematically producing specific flake shapes, not random bashing, planned production. They heated stones to improve flaking quality, showing understanding of thermodynamics that many modern humans lack. One skull, LB1, revealed a brain reorganized for efficiency. The Broadman Area 10, associated with planning and memory, was proportionally huge. Tiny brain, massive planning, center-like evolution, stripped out everything unnecessary and turbocharged what mattered for island survival. They hunted baby stegodons with precision strikes to neural centers. No wasted energy fighting adult elephants. Wait for births, coordinate attacks, strike spine at specific vertebrae. Elephants would fall paralyzed. Quick kill, minimal risk. The strategy required patience, observation, and complex social coordination. For 900,000 years, this worked perfectly. Then Homo sapiens arrived. The archaeological record shows floresiensis vanishing right when modern humans reach Flores. Coincidence? Maybe, but the timing is suspicious. Did we kill them? Outcompete them? Bring diseases? The evidence is frustratingly absent. No battle sites, no mass graves. They just stopped. The last floresiensis might have watched our boats arrive, these giants. Twice her height, with strange tools and stranger idea. Did she understand what she was seeing? The end of a 1,000,000-year success story? Or did she just see more animals to avoid, like the dragons and giant rats that shared her island? One poignant detail: the last floresiensis tools showed desperate innovation, new designs appearing rapidly, experimentation increasing, like they knew something had changed and were trying to adapt faster than evolution allowed. Tool types that had remained stable for thousands of years suddenly exploding into variation. They were trying to evolve culturally at modern human speeds. They couldn't. Dr. Mike Morwood, who discovered Floresiensis, spent his last years searching for evidence of survivors. Local Flores legends speak of the Ebu Gogo small, hairy people who lived in caves until the 1800s. Grandparents claim their grandparents saw them small, fast, spoke in whispers, stole food, but never tools. Every culture has cryptid legends, Morwood admitted. But Flores legends are specific height, behavior, location all match Floresiensis fossils. Either it's the most accurate oral history on Earth, or he never finished the sentence. Scientists aren't supposed to believe in survival, but Morwood kept ringing until cancer stopped him. His final notes contained GPS coordinates for unexplored caves, reports of strange footprints, interviews with elders who insisted the small people were real, probably folklore. Island memories distorted by time. The last Floresiensis died 50,000 years ago when sapiens arrived. That's what the textbooks say. But sometimes in remote Flores caves, archaeologists find fresh-looking tools made in ancient styles. Probably made by modern humans copying old techniques. Probably. The hobbits proved brain size doesn't determine survival. They proved islands create impossible adaptations. They proved 1,000,000 years of success means nothing when the game changes. And they proved that sometimes, just sometimes, extinction leaves question marks instead of periods. On Flores, old women still leave food at cave mouths just in case. Dr. Ralph von Koenigswald was shopping for dragon bones in a Hong Kong pharmacy when he found the tooth that would haunt paleontology forever. 1935. Traditional Chinese medicine ground fossils into powder, selling extinct species as arthritis cures. But this molar was wrong, too big for any known primate, too human for any bear. Gigantopithecus blacki, 10 feet tall, 600 kilograms. Arms like tree trunks. The largest primate that ever lived, surviving until exactly 300,000 years ago, when Homo sapiens emerged in Africa and began the expansion that would empty the world of giants. Imagine a gorilla crossed with a grizzly bear, then triple it, says Dr. Russell Syokin, who spent decades studying Gigantopithecus remains. But herbivorous, a gentle giant that could literally bite your head off, but preferred bamboo. King Kong as a vegetarian. Evolution's strangest joke. For 2 million years, Gigantopithecus dominated Asian forests from China to Vietnam. Not through violence. No evidence of conflict appears on any bones. They dominated through sheer presence. What predator attacks something that could bench press a car? What competitor challenges a creature whose casual backhand would shatter spines? The teeth tell their story. Massive molars with thick enamel worn flat from grinding. Microscopic analysis reveals phytoliths plant crystals from bamboo, fruits, seeds. But the wear patterns show seasonal variation. When bamboo failed, they ate bark, roots, anything fibrous enough to fill stomachs the size of washing machines. Their jaws were engineering marvels, mandibles so massive that early scientists thought they'd found prehistoric giants, human ancestors 10 feet tall. The truth was stranger. These weren't human ancestors, but parallel evolution. Primates that chose size over smarts, strength over strategy. Every adaptation has a cost, Syokin explains. Gigantopithecus paid for size with flexibility. Those massive jaws required massive muscles, which required a sagittal crest, that bony ridge on top of the skull. The muscles squeezed the brain case. Big jaw, small brain. They literally couldn't evolve intelligence without shrinking. For 2 million years, the trade-off worked perfectly. Then the climate began to change. 300,000 years ago, the forests of Southeast Asia started fragmenting. Grasslands expanded. Bamboo, which flowers once every 60 to 120 years then dies, became unreliable. A creature that needs 40 pounds of vegetation daily can't afford unreliable food sources. But here's the mystery. Other megafauna adapted to elephants learned to migrate. Bears diversified diets. Why couldn't a primate with opposable thumbs and decent intelligence adjust? The answer might be standing in your mirror. The last Gigantopithecus teeth show something disturbing. Cavities. Lots of them. These giants were eating more fruit higher sugar content, desperate for calories. Their traditional bamboo forests were disappearing, replaced by environments better suited to a new kind of primate one that used tools, controlled fire, and turned forests into fuel. We don't find Gigantopithecus and early human fossils together, Sayokan notes carefully. But the timing is suspicious. Gigantopithecus vanishes exactly when Homo erectus expands across Asia. Either it's coincidence or the words hang in the air like incense in those Hong Kong pharmacies. Did we hunt them? Unlikely. Why attack something that could tear you in half? Did we outcompete them? Possibly. Homo erectus used fire to clear forests, creating grasslands better suited to human hunting. Every burned forest was less Gigantopithecus habitat, but the saddest possibility. We simply took their ecological niche. Both species preferred the same cave sites, water sources, fruiting trees. When resources got scarce, who won? The 10-foot giant who needed 40 pounds of food daily? Or the clever ape who could eat anything and use tools to multiply it?
Strength?
Vietnamese hill tribes tell stories of the Nguoi Rung forest people, giants covered in red hair who lived in caves, never spoke, never used tools, gentle unless cornered. They'd watch humans from the forest, curious but cautious. The stories say they disappeared when the forests burned. Just stories like the Yeti, Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Every culture has giant ape legends. Collective memory of Gigantopithecus, convergent mythology. We'll never know. The giants left only teeth and jaw fragments. No postcranial bones, no DNA, no clear picture of how they lived or died. But those pharmacy teeth tell one truth. Something massive and impossible once walked where cities now stand. It ate bamboo, avoided conflict, and survived 2 million years of evolutionary challenges. Then it met us. The real King Kong didn't die fighting planes atop skyscrapers. It died quietly in shrinking forests, watching strange apes burn the world it couldn't imagine changing. No drama, no battle, just another giant discovering that in evolution, size is strength until it becomes a liability. In Hong Kong pharmacies, they still sell dragon bones. Sometimes the dragons have very human-looking teeth. The kill. Ling grounds at Rancho La Brea tell the goriest story in paleontology. 55,000 bones, 2,000 saber-toothed cats, one clear message. Smilodon fetalis didn't just hunt. They performed executions with surgical precision. People think saber teeth meant super predator, says Dr. Blair Van Valkenburg, who studied more Smilodon skulls than anyone alive. Wrong. Those 7-inch canines were delicate instruments. One bad bite into bone, they'd shatter. These weren't crushing tools. They were scalpels. The mechanics are horrifying in their elegance. Smilodon's jaw could open 120 degrees, almost straight up and down. Modern lions manage 65. That gape wasn't for roaring. It was for positioning those sabers perfectly on a prey's throat, then using massive neck muscles to drive them through windpipe and carotid arteries simultaneously. Death in under 30 seconds. No struggle, no chase, just precision murder. But here's what made Smilodon truly terrifying. It hunted in coordinated groups. La Brea fossils show multiple cats with healed injuries that would have been fatal for solitary predators with broken legs, shattered ribs, punctured skulls, all mended over months of care. Someone was feeding these injured cats. Someone was protecting them while they healed. We found one specimen with a crushed pelvis, Van Valkenburg continues. It lived for years after the injury, couldn't hunt, could barely walk, but it was well fed, showed no signs of starvation. The only explanation: family, care. Smilodon prides weren't just hunting groups. They were healthcare systems. 300,000 years ago, when our ancestors were still figuring out which end of the rock was sharp, Smilodon had perfected social hunting for 1 million years. They specialized in baby mammoths and ground sloth spray that weighed tons but had vulnerable throats. One cat would distract, another would hamstring, the third would deliver the killing bite. Then they'd feed the old, the injured, the young. The fossil record shows something else. Smilodon avoided humans. Despite overlapping territories for thousands of years, we find almost no human bones with Smilodon tooth marks. They knew we were trouble. Smart predators recognized dangerous prey, but they couldn't avoid us forever. Climate change struck first. The warm, stable environment Smilodon evolved in began fracturing. Prey animals started migrating unpredictably. Ground slot. HS-slow, reliable meals dash, went extinct. Mammoths became scarce. The specialized toolkit that made Smilodon an apex predator became a liability. Imagine being the world's best sushi chef, Van Valkenburg analogizes. Then all the fish disappear. Your skills are worthless. That's what happened to Smilodon. They were too specialized for a changing world. Then humans delivered the killing blow not through hunting. Why fight something that could disembowel you with a headshake? We killed them through ecosystem disruption. Every mammoth we hunted was food Smilodon needed. Every fire we set changed grazing patterns. Every water source we claimed pushed predators into conflict. The last Smilodon fossils, from about 10,000 years ago, showed desperation. Broken teeth from biting bone, something they'd avoided for 1,000,000 years. Arthritis from failed hunts. Malnutrition markers. These weren't apex predators anymore. They were starving specialists watching their world evaporate. One La Brea specimen breaks paleontologists' hearts. A young adult with perfect teeth, no injuries, dead from starvation. It knew how to hunt. It had the tools. But there was nothing left to hunt that matched its evo. Leve techniques, Native American oral histories from California, describe night tigers with teeth like knives. They say the cats would watch human camps from darkness, never attacking, always watching. The stories say they sang a low, mournful sound, unlike any living cat, probably whined through caves. Probably imagination. We tell ourselves Smilodon went extinct because it was overspecialized. Van Valkenburg concludes. But that's human arrogance. They survived 2,000,000 years through ice ages and warm periods. They were perfectly adapted. We just changed the rules faster than evolution could follow. In museum gift shops, children buy plastic Smilodon toys, fascinated by the monster teeth. They play at being predators stalking stuffed mammoths. They don't understand they're reenacting a tragedy, the death of perfection in an imperfect world. Smilodon didn't fail. The world failed Smilodon. And we were the architects of that failure. Armed with nothing but fire and the ability to imagine tomorrow differently than today. The sabers that could kill a mammoth in seconds couldn't pierce the future we were building. No roar, no warning, just 25% more muscle than any lion you've seen, moving. Through Pleistocene Europe like death wearing fur, Panthera spelea, the cave lion, didn't need to announce itself. When you're 700 pounds of silent murder, reputation travels faster than sound. Dr. Gennady Baryshnikov spent 40 years in Russian caves mapping territories that would make modern nations jealous. One male controlled 2,000 square kilometers, he tells colleagues at the Zoological Institute. From valley floors to mountain peaks, they didn't just live in caves. They owned entire landscapes. The evidence is written in claw marks 15 feet up cave walls, territorial scratches that required 600 pounds of muscle to carve into limestone. Modern lions scratch trees. Cave lions autographed mountains. The message was clear. Everything you can see belongs to something that can kill you in seconds. But here's the disturbing part. They preferred human-sized prey. Look at the tooth wear. Baryshnikov points to microscopic images, not the heavy grinding you see in mammoth hunters' fine cuts. Precise work. They specialized in reindeer, horses, and anything else that weighed 100 to 200 pounds. Anything else? The euphemism hangs heavy, because the fossils are explicit. Vindija Cave, Croatia. Human bones with cave lion puncture marks. Petersfalls, Germany. A child's skull showing the characteristic paired holes of massive canines. These weren't accidental encounters. Cave lions learned that humans were perfectly sized meals. Unlike African lions that hunt in prides, cave lions were mostly solitary pairs during mating, mothers with cubs, but otherwise alone. No social hunting meant no shared risk. Every kill had to be certain. This created a predator that was pathologically patient. One fossil trackway in France tells a complete story. Human footprints walking steadily. Lion prints appear 50 meters behind, matching pace exactly. For 200 meters, the tracks parallel human unaware, lion following. Then the human prints suddenly space wider, deeper, running. The lion tracks explode into bounds covering 4 meters per stride. The trackway ends in disturbed sediment. No more human prints. Cave lions were persistence hunters, explains Dr. Martina Pasha from Vienna. Not the explosive ambush of modern cats. They'd follow prey for hours, days, even waiting for the perfect moment. When humans entered Europe 45,000 years ago, we entered a continent where the apex predator, was specifically adapted to hunting us. The Chauvet cave paintings, 32,000 years old, show cave lions with disturbing accuracy. No manes, longer legs than African lions, smaller heads with larger jaw muscles. But it's the eyes that chill painted with pupils dilated, the way cats look in darkness. These weren't observed during safe daylight. Artists saw these lions hunting at night and lived to paint about it. One panel shows 72 lions not a pride. Cave lions didn't form prides. This was a gathering, probably at a seasonal kill site. Humans watched and recorded behavior no modern human has seen. They counted. They memorized. They turned predators into art because understanding meant survival. But humans did more than watch. We competed. Both species wanted the same caves for shelter. The archaeological record shows alternating occupation lion layers, human layers, lion again. We were in a real estate war with 700-pound landlords. Every cave we won meant fighting, something that evolution had designed to kill you. The strangest discovery was at Pavlovan Cave. Pavlovan ritual burial red lady covered in ochre, Pasha notes. But the cave floor below dozens of cave lion cubs, newborn. Someone cleared a nursery den to bury their dead. The symbolism is staggering. Did we worship them? Fear them? Both. Cave lion imagery appears in art from Spain to Siberia, always accurate, always respectful, no caricatures, no diminishment. Humans who could mock hyenas in art treated cave lions with documentary precision. The extinction pattern is telling. Cave lions vanished from Europe right as human populations exploded. Climate played a role there. Reindeer, prey, migrated, forests fragmented territories. But humans were the variable that tipped scales. Every cave we claimed was one less breeding site. Every reindeer we hunted was competition. The last cave lions died in Alaska 14,000 years ago, isolated populations on a continent they'd reached during better times. No caves there, despite the name just open tundra and the wrong kind of prey. They died as they lived. Alone, silent, leaving only questions. Siberian tribes still perform lion dances wearing pelts that look nothing like modern lions' longer limbs. No manes. Da. Manes movements that emphasize stalking over roaring. Cultural memory of something that haunted their ancestors' nightmares for 40,000 years. We won because we could. Imagine them dead, Baryshnikov concludes. They could only see us as prey. That's the difference between animal intelligence and human consciousness. We could picture a world without lions. They couldn't picture a world without us. In the deepest caves of Europe, claw marks still scar the walls' territorial claims in stone, asserting ownership of domains that outlasted their makers. We live in their former kingdoms, build cities where they hunted, never knowing we walk through invisible territories marked by extinct kings. The cave lion's greatest hunting ground became our entire world, and we never even heard them coming. The matriarch remembered every water hole across 10,000 square miles. She knew which valleys flooded in spring, where wolves denned in winter, how ice sang before breaking 60 years of memories encoded in the largest brain of any land animal. She was a woolly mammoth, and her knowledge was keeping 40 relatives alive. Mammoth social structure mirrored elephants but exceeded them, explains Dr. Daniel Fisher, who's examined more mammoth tusks than anyone living. Those tusks are autobiography every day of their lives recorded in growth rings. We can read stress, page, pregnancy, migration, starvation. It's like having their diaries. The Beringia Mammoth Graveyard tells one herd's complete story. 43 individuals who died together 45,000 years ago. Infants in the center, juveniles surrounding them, adults forming the outer ring. They died standing, frozen in protective formation around their young. Whatever killed them, sudden blizzard, ice break, poison gas from permafrost, they faced it as a family. Mammoths weren't just big, elephants in fur coats. They were ecosystem engineers. One mammoth ate 300 pounds of grass daily, but their trampling and fertilization created more grassland than they consumed. They knocked down trees, creating mosaic landscapes. Their migrations carved highways across continents that humans would follow for millennia. The mammoth steppe was a mammoth creation, Fisher continues. From Spain to Canada, they maintained grasslands that supported millions of animals. When mammoths disappeared, forest returned. They didn't just live in their environment, they created it. But creation requires wisdom, and mammoth wisdom was matriarchal. The oldest female led her sisters and daughters, forming leadership councils. Males left at PU. Bertie, forming bachelor groups or going solitary during must hormonal madness. Bulls would battle for breeding rights, but matriarchs decided who actually mated. One tusk from Siberia shows a female who lived 72 years. The isotopes in her ivory map a lifetime of travels. Born near the Arctic Ocean, she migrated to central Siberia as a teenager, spent decades leading her herd across territories the size of Texas, returned to her birthplace to die. 70 years of navigation without GPS, following routes invisible to us. Humans entered this world like mice at a ballet. Kotelny, Russia, 23,000 years ago, a human campsite surrounded by mammoth bones. Not random kill-specific individuals. Young adults, mostly males. The dangerous loners humans could isolate from protective herds. We learned their psychology, exploited their biology. Early humans didn't hunt mammoths, Fisher clarifies. They hunted mammoth behavior. They knew bulls went solitary. They knew matriarchs avoided certain terrains during calving. They knew panic movements when herds smelled fire. We were behavioral psychologists 20,000 years before psychology existed. The Gravettian mammoth hunters left us their technology, SP. Ear points designed not to kill but to hamstring, driving lanes built from stones funneling movement, cliff sites where whole herds were driven to death, but also stranger evidence. Mammoth bone huts arranged with architectural precision, as if the bones themselves contained building instructions. Did mammoths communicate with infrasound like modern elephants? Those frequencies travel miles below human hearing. Matriarchs could coordinate herds beyond visual range, warn of dangers, share locations of resources or communication networks spanning continents, invisible to human senses. We've recorded modern elephants making calls that register on seismographs, Fisher notes. If mammoths did similar, they had continent-wide social networks. Facebook for pachyderms. When humans started disrupting herds, we weren't just killing individuals. We were severing communication systems millions of years old. The baby mammoth Luba, frozen for 42,000 years, had milk in her stomach. Her trunk contained mud. She drowned crossing a river. Her herd had probably crossed safely for generations. One bad step, one moment of inattention. Her body shows signs of desperate struggle, but also care. Someone, likely her mother, tried to pull her free. Trunk marks on her body show futile rescue attempts. Even mammoths couldn't save everyone. The last woolly mammoths died on Wrangel Island 4,000 years ago, isolated, inbred, but still following matriarchal structure. The final herd was led by a female whose tusks show massive stress rings. She was watching her species end, maintaining social order among the dying. Leadership to the last breath. People think mammoths went extinct because of hunting or climate, Fisher concludes. But I think it was the breakdown of their social networks. When human disruption and climate change scattered herds beyond acoustic contact, matriarchs couldn't share survival information. Each herd became an island. Islands die. In a Siberian museum, children touch replica mammoth tusks, tracing growth rings like tree rings. They don't understand they're touching autobiography, the story of giants who created continents, maintained ecosystems, and remembered every water hole across an ice age. Giants whose only failure was assuming the world would always need them. The footprints tell a horror story in slow motion. White Sands, New Mexico, 11,000 years ago. A giant. Ground sloth, 15 feet tall, 3,000 pounds, claws like scimitars, realizes it's being hunted. The fossilized trackway shows it spinning in circles, rearing on hind legs, slashing at threats coming from multiple directions. Inside its turning radius, human footprints small, deliberate, deadly. This wasn't a hunt, declares Dr. Matthew Bennett, who discovered the trackway. This was choreographed execution. The humans knew exactly how fast a ground sloth could turn. They stayed just outside claw range, baiting it into exhaustion. It's like watching a bullfight written in stone. Megatherium americanum, the giant ground sloth, was built like a tank wrapped in fur, armed with claws that could disembowel a saber-tooth. For 4 million years, nothing challenged adult ground sloths. They were herbivorous fortresses, spending their days stripping trees bare, with tongues like industrial sanders. Then, humans arrived with a new weapon: patience. The White Sands trackway shows at least 4 humans, possibly more. Their footprints weave between the sloths, sometimes stepping directly inside its prints. Following so closely, they were matching its rhythm. When the sloth stopped, they stopped. When it turned, they scattered. When it tired, they closed in. Modern humans think prehistoric hunting was about strength, Bennett explains. It wasn't. It was about psychology. Those humans were reading the sloth's mind through its feet. They knew when it would turn before it did. They were inside its decision loop. Ground sloths weren't stupid. Their brain casts show complex cerebral folding, especially in areas associated with spatial memory. They had regular feeding routes, favorite trees, seasonal patterns. They remembered threats. One skeleton from Argentina shows a healed human spear wound. It survived the first encounter, learned, adapted. But learning required survival, and humans were improving their graduation rate. The killing method was horrific in its efficiency. No single death blow. Ground sloth hide was too thick, bones too massive. Instead, dozens of small wounds bleeding it out, following the weakening giant for hours, days maybe, waiting for blood loss and exhaustion to do what spears couldn't. "We found one kill site in Brazil," says Dr. Luciano Verla, who studies sloth-human interactions. 23 broken spear points around one skeleton. But the killing blow? A single puncture at the base of the skull. They waited until it collapsed. Then someone crawled under its head and drove a spear through the only soft spot. Imagine the courage that took, and the desperation. Each ground sloth fed a band for weeks 3,000 pounds of meat, hide for shelters, bones for tools, tendons for rope. One successful hunt could mean the difference between thriving and starvation, worth risking dismemberment. The sloths fought back. Quebrada Jaguar in Peru preserved a battlefield. Human bones scattered among sloth remains. One human skull shows distinctive parallel gouges claw marks. The spacing matches Megatherium exactly. Someone got too close, paid the price. But the most disturbing evidence comes from Mylodon Cave in Chile. The floor is covered in sloth dung, preserved by cold and dryness layer after layer, representing thousands of years of occupation. Then abruptly, human artifacts appear. The dung stops, not gradually, immediately, as if someone evicted the long-time tenants. The dung tells us something crucial, Vela notes. Ground sloths were creatures of habit. Same caves, same roots, same trees. Predictable and predictability to human hunters meant vulnerability. We didn't need to be stronger. We just needed to know where they'd be tomorrow. Native American oral histories describe the big hairy ones with remarkable accuracy. Creatures that walked upright like humans, but towered over trees, peaceful unless cornered, would rear up and roar when threatened to sound like thunder in a cave. The stories always end the same way. The hairy ones trusted too much, moved too slowly, and paid for it. One story from Patagonia is especially haunting. It describes hunters covering themselves in sloth dung to mask their scent, crawling into caves where sloths slept, killing them in darkness. Archaeological evidence supports this. Several cave sites show sloths killed while lying down, spear wounds in their backs, assassinated in their sleep. By 10,000 years ago, the giants were gone. Climate played a role there. Specialized gut bacteria couldn't adapt to rapid vegetation changes. The timing is suspicious. Every region sloths disappeared from had just received its first humans. Australia's Diprotodon, South America's Megatherium, North America's Paramylodon. Different continents, different species, same story.
People ask why we couldn't
coexist, Varela concludes. The answer is in those footprints. Ground sloths evolved to fight face-to-face intimidation displays, claw combat, strength contests. Humans attacked from behind, bled them out, turned their habits against them. We were playing different games. The last ground sloths died on Caribbean islands 5,000 years after mainland extinction. Smaller, adapted to island life. They survived until humans reached them by boat. The final populations lived in Cuba and Hispaniola, browsing seaside vegetation, unaware their relatives were already fossils. When they went extinct, forests across the Americas changed. Trees that evolved with ground sloth pruning grew unchecked. Fruits that required giant sloth guts for germination stopped spreading. Entire ecosystems built around megafauna digestion collapsed. We killed the gardeners and wondered why the garden died. At White Sands, tourists now walk where giants made their last stand. Children put their feet inside fossilized prints, laughing at the size difference. They don't realize they're standing in a crime scene, the spot where human intelligence murdered sloth strength, where patience killed power. The ground sloths were right to spin in circles, slashing at shadows. The shadows had plans. 300,000 years ago, Kesem Cave, Israel. A human ancestor sits by a hearth, rotating a flint blade over controlled flames. Not cooking engineering. The heat penetrates crystalline structures, reducing friction between planes. When it cracks, it will crack predictably. This isn't accidental discovery, reveals Dr. Felipe Natalio, whose team uncovered the evidence. It's materials science older than our species. They knew different stones required different temperatures. Some they heated to 300 degrees Celsius, others to 500 degrees Celsius. They were controlling fire with precision we associate with pottery kilns. This wasn't campfire. This was industrial process. Fire was humanity's first rebellion against nature's rules. Every other animal accepted darkness, cold and raw meat as immutable facts. We decided facts were negotiable. The moment we controlled combustion, we started a war against reality. We're still fighting. But mastery took millennia. Wonderwork Cave in South Africa preserves the struggle layer after layer of ash, charcoal, and failure. Early fires that scorched everything. Middle periods where they achieved control. Later lay. Showing refined technique. Specific woods for specific purposes. Temperatures maintained within narrow ranges. Fire wasn't one discovery, explains Dr. Francesco Berna, who analyzed the wonderwork evidence. It was thousands of discoveries: which wood burns hot versus long, how airflow affects temperature, where to position food for cooking versus drying. Each generation added knowledge. Fire mastery was crowdsourced across centuries. The first weapons were defensive fire circles that kept predators at comfortable distances. Smilodon might be perfectly evolved for throat crushing, but it couldn't evolve past fearing flames. For the first time, humans could sleep without someone watching, could gather without fear, could be weak and survive. Then, we weaponized the fence. FXJJ20 in Kenya, 1.5 million years ago. Archaeologists find something disturbing. A kilometer-wide burn scar preserved in sediment, not a natural wildfire. The ignition points form a line. Someone set the savanna ablaze deliberately. The bones tell why. Hundreds of animals trapped between flames and water, slaughtered en masse.
This wasn't hunting, says Dr. Sarah L. McKee, who studies ancient fire use. This web.
As ecosystem weaponization, they turned landscape into a killing field. Every animal that ran from flames ran toward waiting spears. Efficiency through apocalypse. By 300,000 years ago, fire was surgical. Homo heidelbergensis in Germany used resin extraction requiring exact temperatures too cool, no resin too hot. It burns. They created pitch for hafting weapons, prehistoric superglue made from trees and precision. The chemistry required would challenge modern camping enthusiasts, but fire's greatest weapon was invisible. Smoke. Denisova Cave preserves evidence of fumigation-specific plants, burned not for heat but chemistry. Smoke that repelled insects, killed parasites, maybe even altered consciousness. The cave's famous Denisovan occupants weren't just living with fire. They were practicing chemical warfare against the microscopic world. Every hearth tells a story. Lubick notes. Some burned bone for fuel a grease fire that burns longer than wood. Others show repeated use of medicinal plants. Some hearths were surrounded by worked stones industrial areas where fire enabled tool production. They weren't just using fire. They were specializing it. Fire transformed social structure. Yours. Hearths created humanity's first authentic gathering spaces. Cooking externalized digestion, reducing gut size and freeing calories for brain growth. The fireside became classroom, boardroom, and temple. Stories told by flames became humanity's first shared reality. But mastery came with cost. Hurtu, Ethiopia, 160,000 years ago. A child's skull showing signs of repeated burning, not cooking. Ritual. Fire became powerful enough to require magic, sacred enough to demand sacrifice. The tool that freed us from nature's rules created new rules, cultural ones. Arguably harder to break. Shell Midden from Pinnacle Point, South Africa, 164,000 years ago, reveals industrial-scale cooking, thousands of shells heated to precise temperatures that made extraction easier, an assembly line powered by controlled combustion, mass production before agriculture, fast food before civilization. The real revolution was psychological. Fire meant humans could transform materials, clay to pottery, ore to metal, sand to glass. But first, we had to imagine transformation was possible. Fire taught us that reality's rules had exceptions, that solid could become liquid, that toxic could become edible, that weak. Ape could become strong through chemistry. Every technology we've developed stems from fire mastery, Natalio concludes. Engines burn fuel. Computers use electricity which we generate through combustion. Nuclear power is just very complicated fire. That moment 300,000 years ago, when someone realized fire was controllable, that was the moment we stopped being animals and started being alchemists. But perhaps fire's greatest gift was time after sunset, to plan tomorrow, time to teach children complex skills, time to create art, music, culture. Darkness had ruled half of every day since time began. Fire gave us those stolen hours. And in those hours, we plotted the overthrow of nature itself. Other species adapted to the world as they found it. We found fire and decided the world needed adapting to us. The flames still burn in every engine, every power plant, every rocket pushing toward stars. The rebellion that started in Kesem Cave continues. We're still that ape by the fire, convinced that reality is negotiable. So far, we've been right. Grotte Mandrin, southern France, 54,000 years ago. A Homo sapiens craftsman holds what will become humanity's first guided missile, the bow. W is elegant flexible U, backed with sinew, strung with twisted gut. The arrows are masterpieces. Microlithic tips weighing less than 3 grams. Perfectly balanced, fletched with feathers. This isn't evolution. This is revolution. Finding these artifacts was like finding a laptop in a pyramid, admits Dr. L. Metz, whose team discovered the weapons. Neanderthals were still using thrusting spears. These humans brought death from 50 meters away. It's the technological equivalent of bringing guns to a knife fight. The mathematics of murder had changed overnight. A thrusting spear requires closing to contact range with prey that evolved to kill anything that close. Success rate, maybe 10% against dangerous game. Survival rate for hunters, questionable. Every Neanderthal skeleton shows rodeo rider trauma-broken bones from wrestling prey to death. Bow hunting. Stand behind a tree. Draw.
Release. Miss. Try again from 50. Hit.
Track the bleeding animal until it collapses. Success rate, 60%.
Survival rate, 95%. The bow didn't just change hunting it, changed the risk-reward calculation of being human.
Neanderthals were the UFC fighters of human species, Metz explains.
All muscle, close.
E, combat. Taking hits to give hits. Sapiens were snipers. Why get punched when you can shoot from the parking lot? But the bow was more than distance. It was force multiplication. A 100-pound human drawing a 50-pound bow could deliver 200 pounds of impact force. Suddenly, children could be lethal hunters. Women could defend camps solo. Elderly craftsmen could contribute calories instead of consuming them. Demographics shifted overnight. The arrows tell a deeper story. Those 3 gram points required understanding of ballistics that wouldn't be formalized for 50,000 years. Too heavy. They drop short. Too light. They lack penetration. Wrong balance point. They tumble. The Mandrin points are perfect aerodynamic, weighted for stability, designed for specific prey. These weren't generalist tools, notes Dr. Ludovic Slimak, site director. We found points for birds, others for rabbits, others clearly for larger game. Specialized ammunition. They were matching projectiles to targets like modern hunters select calibers. The manufacturing process required convergent technologies. Bow would needed specific moisture content, seasoning time, and precision shaping strings demanded fiber processing. NG, spinning, and tensile strength calculations arrows needed straight shafts, consistent diameter, and perfect spine flex. Fletching required understanding of spin stabilization. Each component worthless alone, revolutionary together. Neanderthals saw this technology we know because they tried copying it. Late Neanderthal sites show experimental points, attempts at composite tools. But copying complex technology isn't like copying stone flakes. Without the full technical package, bow, string, arrows, fletching, release technique, the pieces were useless. It's like showing someone a car when they've only known walking. Slimak analogizes. They might copy the wheels, but without understanding combustion, transmission, steering, it's just funny-shaped rocks. Neanderthals had 200,000 years of thrusting spear tradition. Hard to abandon what works for what might work. The social implications were seismic. Bow hunting could be taught to children on safe targets, no risk of being gored while learning. Skills transferred through practice, not near-death experience. A 10-year-old with a bow was more dangerous than a Neanderthal champion with a spear. Ambush hunting became assassination. Ants could hide 50 meters from water sources, picking off prey without revealing themselves. One archer could control an entire valley. 10 archers could depopulate a migration route. The landscape of death expanded from arm's reach to arrow's flight. But perhaps most revolutionary, the bow worked on humans. We don't find evidence of Neanderthal sapiens warfare, Metz carefully notes. But Neanderthals disappeared from regions right after bow technology arrived. Coincidence? Maybe. But if someone's shooting at you from distances you can't retaliate, do you fight or relocate? The bow created humanity's first arms race. Longer ranges demanded better materials. Better materials enabled faster arrows. Faster arrows required advanced fletching. By 20,000 years ago, arrow technology would shame modern carbon fiber attempts. We found arrows that flew true for 100 meters, penetrating hide that stops bullets. Cave art changes after bow invention. Earlier art shows humans fleeing animals, hiding, cowering. Post-bow art shows humans dominating animals pierced with multiple arrows. Hunters standing casually as prey dies at distance. The predator-prey relationship had inverted. We were no left. Ongo were participants in nature's dance. We were choreographers. The bow was humanity's declaration of independence from ecological rules. Slimak concludes. Every other predator evolved within constraints: claw length, jaw strength, running speed. The bow said, we opt out. We'll set our own constraints, define our own limits. Evolution by invention, not selection. At Grot Mandrin, archaeologists found something poignant. A child's bow 30% smaller than adult versions, perfect proportions, working string, blunt practice arrows. Someone spent weeks crafting a training weapon for a 6-year-old, teaching them that distance equals safety, that technology beats biology, that the world bends to those who bend the bow. 54,000 years later, we've traded bows for bullets, arrows for missiles. But the principle remains. Why engage when you can eliminate from safety? Why evolve when you can invent? The bow didn't just change hunting. It changed what it meant to be human, from participants to predators, from evolution's subjects to its masters. All because someone figured out that bent wood could store energy, and stored energy could be released on demand. Physics defeating physiology. Mind over muscle. The first shot fired in humanity's war against biological limitations. We're still firing. The Neanderthal child died confused. No predator wounds, no starvation, just fever that wouldn't break, lungs that wouldn't clear, and parents who could only watch. The year was 45,000 BCE. The place, Vindija Cave, Croatia. The killer, a tropical disease that hitched a ride in Homo sapiens' blood, finding virgin immune systems in European natives. Neanderthals had never experienced African pathogens, explains Dr. Charlotte Hoodcroft from Cambridge, who studies ancient disease transmission. Their immune systems were calibrated for European threats: cold-adapted bacteria, cave parasites, local viruses. When sapiens arrived carrying tropical diseases, it was smallpox meets Native Americans 40,000 years early. The evidence hides in Neanderthal DNA. Modern humans carry Neanderthal immune genes, but specifically ones dealing with European pathogens. The reverse isn't true. Neanderthals didn't acquire our tropical disease resistance. They died before they could adapt. Consider Helicobacter pylori, the stomach bacteria that causes ulcers. Genetic analysis shows it split into African and European strains. 100,000 years ago, Neanderthals had the European strain. Sapiens brought the African variety. When the strains met in Neanderthal stomachs, the result was likely catastrophic gastritis, not immediately fatal, but weakening. And in the Pleistocene, weakness was death. Disease doesn't fossilize, Hoodcroft notes, but population patterns do. We see Neanderthal sites abandoned right after sapiens contact, not conquered, just empty, like they fled something invisible. The invisible killers were legion. Tuberculosis carried from Africa, thriving in close-quarters cave living, malaria dormant in sapiens' blood, activating in new hosts. Tapeworms evolved for our guts, finding new homes. Each migrant brought a microscopic army their immune systems had learned to tolerate. But the cruelest killer, love. Denisova Cave revealed Denny, the 90,000-year-old girl with a Neanderthal mother and Denisovan father, proof that human species weren't just meeting, they were mating. Every hybrid child was a disease vector, carrying pathogens between previously isolated populations. Sexually transmitted diseases were probably devastating, Hoodcroft explains. HPV, herpes diseases that tar. N. Smith, through intimacy. Neanderthal groups were small, isolated. One infected individual could destroy an entire bloodline through normal mating patterns. The Shanidar Cave Neanderthals tell stories of care and catastrophe. Shanidar I survived multiple injuries that should have killed him, evidence of medical knowledge and social support. But Shanidar IV, the famous flower burial, shows signs of chronic respiratory infection. They buried him with medicinal plants. It didn't help. Sapiens had advantages beyond immunity. Our larger social networks meant disease outbreaks burned through populations, but left survivors. Neanderthal groups of 10 to 20 individuals, one bad outbreak meant extinction. No herd immunity, no recovery population, just empty caves and orphaned tools. We model disease spread in small populations, says Dr. G. Müller from Vienna. Below 50 individuals, one novel pathogen can cause complete collapse. Neanderthals lived below that threshold. Every new disease was potentially apocalyptic. The exchange wasn't one-sided. Sapiens acquired Neanderthal diseases too. We carry genetic evidence of ancient viral insertions from our cousins. But our populations were larger, more connected. What killed them immunized us. Their tragedy became our antibodies. Cave sediments tell the tale. Neanderthal occupation layers show steady accumulation, centuries of continuous habitation. Then sapiens artifacts appear nearby. Within archaeological moments, Neanderthal layers stop not gradually, abruptly, like someone turned off a switch. People imagine warfare, genocide, Müller reflects. But the evidence suggests something quieter. Neanderthals vanishing from landscapes they'd owned for millennia, fleeing an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't understand. The last Neanderthals retreated to Gibraltar, the Iberian Peninsula's southern tip isolated, nowhere left to run. Their final sites show dietary stress, repeated infections, population collapse. They died looking at Africa where their invisible killers originated. Modern humans carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA, mostly immune genes. We're walking memorials to the diseases that killed them. Every flu we survive, every infection we fight, we use antibodies borrowed from the dead. Their extinction became our evolution. Disease shaped human history more than any war, Hoodcroft concludes. When sapiens met, Neanderthals, Denisovans, others, we didn't need superior weapons. We carried weapons they couldn't see. Microscopic munitions evolved in African rainforests, deployed in European caves. The Vindeja child's parents couldn't know their daughter died from interspecies contact, couldn't know her fever came from neighbors, not nature. They probably blamed themselves, tried every remedy, prayed to whatever Neanderthals found sacred. Modern parents recognize those feelings, the helplessness of watching children suffer from invisible threats, the desperate search for cures. The difference? We have antibiotics, vaccines, treatments built on immune systems strengthened by surviving what killed our cousins. Every medicine cabinet is a monument to extinct humans whose deaths taught our ancestors' bodies to fight. We didn't murder other human species. We infected them. And then we inherited their immune lessons, written in DNA. The Invisible War ended 40,000 years ago. We won by surviving what killed everyone else. The victory conditions written in antibodies. The prize. A planet cleared of competition by creatures too small to see. 300,000 years ago, Earth's thermostat broke. Not broken like needs repair, broken like violently swinging between Ice Age and tropical paradise every few thousand years. Marine isotope stage 9 was climate chaos incarnate, and every human species was along for the ride. Imagine New York having Bangkok's climate, then Greenland's, then Bangkok's again within a single lifetime, describes Dr. Peter Clark from Oregon State. Sea levels yo-yoing 20 meters, forests becoming tundra, becoming forests. We think climate change is unprecedented. Our ancestors lived it on fast forward. The Greenland ice cores tell the story in frozen detail. Temperatures swinging 10 degrees Celsius in decades, methane levels revealing tropical wetlands, where permafrost exists today, dust layers showing Sahara-like deserts where Amazon-like rainforests had thrived. Earth wasn't gradually changing. It was having seizures. For Homo heidelbergensis in Europe, this meant their reliable hunting grounds transformed unpredictably. One generation's mammoth steppe became the next generation's deciduous forest. Prey species appeared and vanished like seasonal decorations. Imagine planning survival when your ecosystem had ADHD. Heidelbergensis sites show frantic adaptation, notes Dr. Katarina Harvati from Tübingen. Tool types changing rapidly, diet shifting from megafauna to rabbits to shellfish. They were evolutionary jazz musicians improvising survival in real time. Neanderthals responded by becoming climate specialists. Their bodies, short, muscular, with large noses for warming air, were built for cold. When Europe froze, they thrived. When it warmed, they retreated to mountain refugia, waiting for winter's return. Climate refugees before climate was political. But Denisovans played three-dimensional climate chess. Genetic evidence shows they occupied environments from Arctic Siberia to tropical Wallacea-same species, radically different adaptations. Their DNA gifted Tibetans high-altitude genes and Melanesians tropical disease resistance. They weren't adapting to climate, they were collecting adaptations like Pokémon cards. Denisovans broke the rules, Harvati admits. One species shouldn't span such ecological diversity. It's like finding polar bears in the Amazon, except it worked for 200,000 years. Then there's Homo sapiens. We emerged during peak climate chaos in Africa, where the swings were wildest. East Africa's lakes filled and emptied like a broken bathtub. The Sahara greened and died repeatedly. Our birthplace was climate ground zero. Sapiens evolved weird because of climate instability, explains Dr. Rick Potts from the Smithsonian. Big brains, yes, but also incredible behavioral flexibility. We didn't adapt to any specific environment. We adapted to adaptation itself. The evidence is our physiology. Sweating, rare in mammals, let us hunt during heat that immobilized prey. Subcutaneous fat distribution allowed both insulation and cooling. Our metabolism could switch from carbs to fats to proteins without specialized guts. We were the Swiss Army knives of human species. Lake Malawi's sediment cores reveal the cost. Megadroughts lasting centuries, population bottlenecks where humanity nearly went extinct. One genetic study suggests all humans descend from maybe 10,000 individuals who survived a catastrophic drought 70,000 years ago. We're all cousins of catastrophe survivors. Climate selected for culture, Potts emphasizes. Physical adaptations take generations. Cultural adaptations take conversations. When climate changed faster than genes could follow, only species that could change behavior survived. The archaeological record. RD shows this cultural acceleration. 300,000 years ago, basic tools, occasional fire. 200,000 years ago, diverse toolkits, consistent hearths. 100,000 years ago, jewelry, art, complex hafting. 50,000 years ago, bows, sewn clothing, watercraft. Each climate swing forced innovation or death. But perhaps climate's cruel joke was making everywhere uninhabitable. Sometimes Europe's perfect hunting grounds became barren ice. Africa's lush lakes became salt flats. Asia's steppes became flooded plains. No place was permanently safe. Movement became mandatory. Other human species picked territories and optimized, notes Dr. Jessica Thompson from Yale. Neanderthals perfected Europe. Erectus mastered Asia. But sapiens, we perfected leaving. Our superpower wasn't adapting to place, but abandoning places. The last climate laugh came 40,000 years ago, a brief warm spell. Then the Campanian ignimbrite supereruption triggered volcanic winter. Temperatures crashed globally. Neanderthals, already stressed, couldn't adapt fast enough. Denisovans vanished from the record. Only hypermobile sapiens survived by running to wherever was least catastrophic. Modern humans complain about seasonal ele. Jize and need 3 weather apps to plan weekends. Ancestors navigated climate change that would break computer models. They didn't have meteorology. They had memory, mobility, and the ability to change everything when everything changed. We won the human race because we refused to pick a lane, Thompson concludes. Every other species specialized for specific climates. We specialized in having no specialization, champions of inconsistency in an inconsistent world. 300,000 years later, we've temporarily stabilized climate with technology, air conditioning, heating, irrigation. We've paused the roller coaster our ancestors rode for millennia. But the pause is artificial. The climate's nature hasn't changed. Only our ability to ignore it has. When that ability fails and physics suggests it will rediscover what our ancestors knew. Climate isn't scenery, it's the director, and it's been planning plot twists for 300,000 years. We're just the latest characters who thought we'd figured out the script. Our ancestors would laugh if they weren't extinct from being wrong about weather. Close your eyes. You're standing on land that no longer exists. Beneath your feet, 900 feet of Pennsylvania. Circumfuge ocean will one day flow. But 30,000 years ago, you're in the center of Beringia continent, twice the size of Texas, connecting Asia to Alaska. Something is coming. The ground trembles, not an earthquake. Footsteps. 10,000 woolly mammoths moving like a living mountain range, their tusks catching morning light, breath steaming in synchronized clouds. Behind them, following the rivers of meat, come the predators. And behind the predators, almost invisible in their patience, come the humans. Beringia wasn't a bridge, insists Dr. John Hoffaker from the University of Colorado. It was a homeland. People lived there for 15,000 years. Generations were born, lived full lives, and died without ever seeing either continent's edge. The numbers stagger belief. At its peak, Beringia stretched 1,000 miles north to south, not an ice corridor but a vast grassland, the most productive ecosystem Earth has ever known. 1 square mile supported more large animals than an entire modern national park. Mammoth, bison, horse, camel, lion bear a parade of giants following an endless summer of grass. Recent DNA from a 31,000-year-old milk-tooth found in Siberia reveals the human story. A popular. Tians split from East Asians, isolated in Beringia, developing unique genetic markers. For 15,000 years, these ancient Beringians lived in their lost world while ice walls blocked them from the Americas. The climate data shows why they stayed. While Europe froze under mile-high glaciers, Beringia remained oddly mild. Ocean currents and geographic positioning created a refugiuma pocket of survival in a dying world. Summer temperatures reached 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Rivers teemed with salmon. Berries carpeted southern slopes. But it was the megafauna that made Beringia legendary. Nowhere else on Earth have we found such bone density. At some sites, you can't dig without hitting mammoth tusks. The bones stack like geological layers, death piled upon death, preserved in permafrost, waiting to tell their story. Then, 14,000 years ago, the ice walls melted. The ancient Beringians faced a choice: follow the megafauna south into an unknown continent, or retreat into Asia. The archaeological record suggests they split. Some went south, becoming the ancestors of Native Americans. Others returned to Siberia, their DNA surviving in scattered populations. But Beringia itself was doomed. As glaciers melted, sea levels rose 400 feet. The mammoth steppe drowned, meter by meter. The last mammoths retreated to shrinking islands. The last humans paddled away in skin boats, watching their homeland disappear beneath grey waves. Today, Bering Strait fishermen still pull up mammoth teeth in their net tusks black with age, polished by current. Messages from a drowned continent reminding us that entire worlds can vanish, taking their giants with them. When we dream of lost Atlantis, Hofer notes, we're dreaming of Beringia. It's the only real continent that sank beneath the waves, taking an entire ecosystem to the abyss. The mammoths knew. That's why they kept walking south. They were running from the rising sea. White Sands, New Mexico, 2021. David Bustos kneels in the dried lake bed, his hand trembling over an impossibility, a human footprint, perfect as if made yesterday. Except yesterday was 23,000 years ago, during the last glacial maximum, when mile-high ice sheets supposedly made human migration impossible. The footprint belongs to a teenager walking at 3.8 miles per hour, carrying a toddler on their hip. You can see where they shifted the child's weight, where they stopped to rest, where the toddler dealer was put down and picked up again. A moment of parenting frozen in stone that shatters everything we thought we knew. This changes the entire story of human arrival in the Americas, whispers Dr. Matthew Bennett, staring at tracks that shouldn't exist. These people were here during the worst of the Ice Age, living alongside creatures we thought they never met. The trackway tells a thriller. Human prints cross mammoth tracks. A giant ground sloth's prints overlap the human trail, then veer sharply at caught the human scent. Most shocking, the humans were barefoot. In an environment where one mistake meant death, they walked unprotected among giants. But White Sands is just the latest bombshell. In San Diego, the Cerruti mastodon site dates to 130,000 years ago. Archaeologist Tom DeMare points to spiral fractures on mastodon bones that breaks that only happen on fresh bone. Beside them, cobblestones showing percussion marks. Someone was here smashing bones from marrow when Neanderthals still ruled Europe. The establishment erupted. Impossible, contamination, misinterpretation. But 3 different dating methods confirmed the age. The stones came from 30 kilometers away. The werepat. Turns match experimental replication. If it's not human activity, nobody can explain what it is. In Mexico's Chique White Cave, 2,000 stone artifacts date back 33,000 years. In Brazil's Serra da Capivara, painted cave art might be 50,000 years old. Each discovery pushes human arrival deeper into impossible time. We've been looking in the wrong places, admits archaeologist Cyprian Arnaud. We assumed humans walked here. What if they sailed? The coastal migration theory is gaining momentum. Sea levels were 400 feet, lower a chain of islands dotted the Pacific coast. Kelp forests created a marine highway rich in seals, fish, and shellfish. You could boat from Japan to Chile without losing sight of land. But if humans were here 100,000 plus years ago, where are the bodies, the tools, the DNA? The answer might be underwater. Rising seas drowned the coastal routes these ancient mariners would have followed. Their camps, their bones, their entire story lies beneath 400 feet of Pacific Ocean. Native American oral histories suddenly seem less mythical. The Teeling Gates speak of escaping floods that came up to the mountains. The Hadda describe ice walls reaching to the sky. The Yupik tell of a Pa, ancestors arriving when the world was different. Indigenous peoples have been telling us they've always been here, notes archaeologist Paulette Steeves. Maybe it's time we listened. The White Sands teenager didn't know they were making history. They were just carrying a child through dangerous territory, probably gathering food, probably scared. Their footprints accidentally created evidence that would, 23,000 years later, rewrite textbooks. One small step for a prehistoric parent. One giant leap for American archaeology. The subway worker's headlamp catches something white in the tunnel wall. Bone.
Massive bone, 1991. Beneath Dykeman Street. They've just uncovered Manhattan's deepest secret.
A mastodon tusk gleaming like buried ivory in the exact spot where the A train now rumbles. Welcome to Ice Age New York, where your morning commute crosses ancient killing grounds. Picture Broadway 20,000 years ago, where taxis now honk. Mastodons trumpeted 11 feet tall, 10,000 pounds defending calves from dire wolf packs. The Harlem River. a glacial meltwater torrent where giant beavers built dams you could walk across. Central Park, a spruce forest where 12-foot-tall ground sloths strip bark with claws like scythes. Manhattan was megafauna central, explains Dr. Sidney Horenstein, urban geologist. The variety of species here rivaled Africa's Serengeti, just bigger. Everything was bigger. The evidence hides beneath skyscrapers. In 1858, workers digging the Harlem Canal hit a complete mastodon skeleton. 1925, Inwood apartment construction uncovered another. The Cohos mastodon, found near Albany, stood 10 feet tall with tusks like curved telephone poles, carbon dated 13,000 years old. Cause of death, humans. But mastodons were the gentle giants, the real monsters. Cave bears denning where Wall Street now trades, saber-toothed cats ambushing prey where Times Square now glitters. And the giant short-faced bear, 1,500 pounds of muscle and rage, fast as a horse, tall as your ceiling. One fossil found in Dutchess County shows claw marks 15 feet up a tree. It wasn't climbing, it was reaching. The American lion ruled this concrete jungle before concrete existed. Panthera atrox, 25% larger than African lions, hunting in coordinated prides. Their roars echoed off the Palisades. They cached kills in caves beneath modern Manhattan. Their tooth marks still visible on 20,000 years ago. Our old bones. Every New York construction project is a dice roll, notes paleontologist Carl Malling. We might find a subway tunnel or a saber-toothed den. Usually, it's both. The Hudson River told time in corpses. Spring floods washed mammoth carcasses downstream, creating bone jams where predators gathered. One site near Yonkers contained remains of 17 different megafauna species in a single layer, a snapshot of death from when New York City was wilder than any Hollywood movie. Then came the humans. Clovis Point's distinctive spearheads appear in New York strata 13,000 years ago. Within 1,000 years, the megafauna vanished. Coincidence? The timing suggests otherwise. These first New Yorkers were armed, organized, and hungry. But they faced competition. Dire wolves hunted in packs of 30, using relay tactics to exhaust mammoth herds. Short-faced bears claimed entire territories, marking boundaries with claw marks still visible on surviving rock faces. The first human New Yorkers weren't colonizing empty land. They were invading occupied territory. One human skull fragment from Pelham Bay shows healing from massive trauma, likely a glancing blow from a cave bear. They survived somehow. Early New Yorkers were as tough as their modern descendants claim to be. When you walk Manhattan streets, Malling muses, you're following mammoth trails. They carved the easiest routes through glacial terrain. Broadway follows an ancient game trail. So does the Boston Post Road. We still use their commute. The city that never sleeps was built on the bones of giants who slept forever. Every skyscraper stands on their graves. Denisova Cave, Siberia, 2018. The bone fragment is tiny, smaller than a penny. But when geneticist Vivienne Slon sees the DNA results, she checks them 3 times, then calls her supervisor, then sits in stunned silence. The bone belongs to a teenage girl who died 90,000 years ago. Her mother was Neanderthal. Her father was Denisovan. She is Denithi, only first-generation hybrid ever found. Proof that different human species didn't just meet, they fell in love. The odds of finding this individual were astronomical, Slon explains, still amazed. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, then discovering the needle is made of gold. But Denny was just the beginning. December 2024 brought revolutionary discoveries that rewrote the entire interbreeding timeline. New analysis of ancient genomes pinpointed the Neanderthal-Homo sapiens mixing to exactly 47,000 years ago, lasting 7,000 years. Not brief encounters sustained relationships across millennia. Picture the scene. A Neanderthal woman in prehistoric Croatia meets a Homo sapiens man. He's taller, slimmer, with a strange rounded skull. She's shorter, stronger, with a body built for Ice Age survival.
They don't share a language. Their cultures are alien, yet something sparks.
9 months later, a child is born carrying both lineages. That child's descendants include everyone reading this whose ancestors left Africa. Every non-African alive today carries the genetic signature of these ancient love affairs, reveals population geneticist Fernando Racimo. We're all products of prehistoric romance. The evidence shows this wasn't rare. In the Os cave in Romania, a 40,000-year-old human had a Neanderthal great-great-grandparent. At Sunghir in Russia, individuals show Neanderthal ancestry from just 2 to 4 generations back. These species weren't just coexisting, they were dating. But love came with a price. Hybrid males were likely sterile, a biological barrier that prevented full speciation.
Wise merger.
Only female hybrids could pass on combined genes, creating a one-way genetic flow that we still carry. Some Neanderthal DNA helped us. Immune system variants that fight disease, genes for fat metabolism that aided survival. Other variants brought problems. Increased risk of depression, addiction, blood clotting disorders. It's the ultimate star-crossed lover's tale, muses archaeologist Huang Zilong. Different species meeting at the edge of extinction, creating children who carried both legacies forward. The archaeological record hints at the social dynamics. At some sites, we find Neanderthal tools alongside sapiens jewelry technology exchange, cultural mixing, perhaps gift-giving between lovers. At Grotte du Rennes in France, Neanderthals suddenly started making jewelry right after modern humans arrived nearby. Coincidence? Or someone trying to impress a date? The last Neanderthals show the highest genetic diversity, suggesting increased interbreeding as their populations shrank. Desperate times, desperate measures. Or perhaps barriers broke down when survival mattered more than differences. One poignant detail. Neanderthal women left more genetic legacy than
Neanderthal men.
The pattern suggests sapiens males with Neanderthal females was more common than the reverse. Whether by choice, force, or cultural exchange, the story written in our genes is complex. We used to think Neanderthals were primitive brutes. Zilong reflects, but someone loved them. Someone chose them as partners, raised hybrid children, mourned their deaths. That's not conquest. That's connection. Today, billions carry the proof of ancient affection in every cell. When you fight off a cold using Neanderthal immune variants, you're benefiting from a love story 47,000 years old. Species barriers meant nothing to hearts that recognized kindred spirits across evolutionary divides. Love found a way. Love always does. Dr. Sarah Chen stares at her computer screen, watching artificial intelligence analyze 300,000-year-old stone tools. The AI has just identified something no human archaeologist noticed in 40 years of study. A manufacturing pattern dash, a signature. These ancient tools weren't random. They were branded. The AI, I detected individual toolmaker styles, Chen explains. Excitement, breaking through scientific calm. Like handwriting analysis, but for rocks, we can now identify specific Neanderthal artisans who lived 200,000 years ago. Welcome to archaeology's AI revolution, where machine learning reads ancient minds through their tools. The breakthrough came when researchers fed neural networks thousands of stone tool images. The AI learned to recognize patterns invisible to human eyes, micro-decisions in flaking sequences, preferred angles, personal quirks preserved in stone. Suddenly, anonymous artifacts became individual stories. At Schöningen, Germany, AI analysis of those 300,000-year-old wooden spears revealed sophisticated engineering. The wood grain was deliberately oriented for maximum strength, weight distribution matched modern javelins. The makers understood physics they couldn't write equations for. These weren't instinctive creations, notes cognitive archaeologist Dr. Marcus Webb. They show theory of mind understanding how objects behave in flight. That requires abstract thinking we didn't think existed 300,000 years ago. Even more stunning, I detected teaching signatures. At multiple sites, tools show a progression from clumsy apprentice work to master craftsmanship, but with consistent quirks suggesting the same teacher. We can now rack ancient master-apprentice relationships across decades. The Lavoie technique that revolutionary planned tool-making shows, regional schools. AI identifies distinct French, German, and Middle Eastern styles, suggesting cultural transmission networks spanning continents, ideas spreading at walking speed, but spreading nonetheless. At Kesem Cave in Israel, AI analysis revealed something bizarre. Tools from 300,000 years ago show design evolution each generation slightly improving on the last. Not random variation, but directed improvement. The toolmakers were running experimental programs, testing innovations, keeping what worked. They were engineers, Webb insists. Prehistoric engineers running R&D programs that lasted centuries. The AI even detected tool ethics. At some sites, perfectly functional tools were discarded unused. Why? The AI found microfractures, suggesting the stone's quality didn't meet standards. Ancient quality control. Pride in craftsmanship when survival was uncertain. Brain scan studies of modern Nappers people who recreate ancient tools show intense activation in language areas. The same neural networks used for grammar apparently govern tool constructi. This suggests tool-making and language evolved together, each driving the other toward complexity. Every strike required syntax, explains neuroscientist Dr. Lisa Feldman. Subject hammerstone acts on object quarter, produce result flake. That's grammar in stone. The implications stagger. If 300,000-year-old tools show this complexity, their makers had modern-level cognitive abilities. They thought abstractly, planned hierarchically, taught systematically. They just couldn't write it down. One Neanderthal site in France shows tool styles, suddenly changing 45,000 years ago, right when modern humans arrived. But the AI detected something surprising. Neanderthals weren't copying sapiens tools. They were innovating in response, creating new designs that outperformed both traditional styles. Competition drove creativity. The presence of modern humans triggered a Neanderthal renaissance, Chen notes. They didn't just adapt, they innovated. The AI revolution shows our ancestors' minds were never primitive. They were brilliant engineers trapped in a world without metal, brilliant teachers without writing, brilliant thinkers without words to capture their thoughts. Their tools weren't just rocks. They were crystallized intelligence, fossilized force, ancient minds reaching across 300,000 years to touch ours. Ow! I is finally letting us touch back. Madagascar, 2,000 years ago. A child points at the forest edge, screaming, "The ground is moving." No, something on the ground is moving. Something impossible. A bird tall as 3 men stacked, striding on legs like tree trunks. The elephant bird, 10 feet tall, 1,000 pounds. Earth's largest bird meeting Earth's newest predator. Humans. Within 1,000 years, they're gone. An entire branch of evolution erased. The pattern is global, predictable, and horrifying. Humans arrive. Megafauna die. Every single time. It's the most consistent pattern in archaeology, admits Dr. Paul Martin, father of the overkill hypothesis. Follow human footprints around the globe. Within 1,000 years, the giants vanish. Australia, Americas, Madagascar, even tiny islands. The equation is simple. Humans plus megafauna equals extinction. The numbers don't lie. Australia, 46,000 years ago. Humans land. Within 10,000 years, 90% of large animals extinct. Diprotodon, the 6,000-pound wombat. Megalania, the 20-foot lizard. Thylacoleo, the marsupial lion. Gone. North America. 15,000 years ago. Humans cross Beringia. Within 3,000 years, mammoths, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, short-faced bears extinct. South America loses 80% of its giants. The pattern repeats like a broken record of death. But here's the disturbing part. It wasn't even hard. Computer models show just 100 human hunters could drive mammoths extinct in 300 years through massive slaughter, just by killing one mammoth per hunter per year. That's it. Large animals reproduce slowly. Kill just 2% annually, and mathematical extinction becomes inevitable. We didn't need to be bloodthirsty, explains modeler Dr. John Olroy. We just needed to be slightly better at killing than mammoths were at breeding. The math does the rest. The killing methods were horrifyingly efficient. Drive entire herds off cliffs, set grasslands ablaze, creating walls of fire. Most disturbing, humans learned to kill babies. Why fight a 10-ton mammoth when you can spear a 200-pound calf? The juveniles died. The species couldn't recover. On New Zealand, the pattern accelerated to nightmare speed. Polynesians arrived 700 years ago. Within 100 years, a human lifetime. Every MOA species extinct. 9 species from 30 to 500 pounds. The Host's eagle, which preyed on moairs, followed them into oblivion. Moairs had thrived for 50 million years, notes extinction expert Dr. Richard Holdaway. They survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, climate shifts. Then humans arrived. Game over in a century. The evidence is written in charcoal. Wherever humans went, fire followed. Australia's fire record shows a massive spike when humans arrived. Rainforests that hadn't burned in 100,000 years suddenly ablaze. The giants couldn't adapt to modified landscapes. Some fought back. Cave bear skeletons show human spear wounds, but also human skeletons showing cave bear trauma. Mammoths learned to avoid human scent. Island species fled to mountaintops. It didn't matter. We followed. We always followed. The saddest evidence comes from dung. Mammoth dung disappears from sediment cores within centuries of human arrival. But here's the heartbreak. Pollen records show the plants mammoths ate thrived after their extinction. The ecosystem could still support them. Only one variable had changed. Every culture has flood myths, Martin observed before his death. But we should have extinction myth stories of the world we destroyed, the giants we erased, the diversity we simplified into a human-dominated monoculture. The great dying wasn't natural, wasn't inevitable, was entirely, unforgivably human. And it was just the beginning. The baby mammoth took 22 months to develop in the womb, nearly 2 years of pregnancy, draining the mother's car, lasium for tusks that would never fully grow. When it finally emerged, a 200-pound newborn in a world of predators, it needed 14 years to reach breeding age if it survived. That's the mathematics of extinction. When you're giant, everything takes longer. Longer pregnancies, longer childhoods, longer between births. In a world where death comes fast, slow reproduction is a death sentence. Large body size was evolution's greatest trap, explains population biologist Dr. Chris Johnson. For 50 million years, being big meant being safe. Then humans arrived and rewrote the rules overnight. Consider the brutal math. A mammoth cow could produce maybe 15 calves in a lifetime if she lived 60 years. A human woman could have that many children by age 30. When humans started hunting mammoth calves, we were killing their future faster than they could replace it. The energy economics were even worse. A mammoth needed 400 pounds of vegetation daily. During ice ages, when grasslands shrank, that meant walking 20 miles per day just to eat, burning calories to find calories, living on the edge of starvation, even in good times. Then humans disrupted migration routes, set fires that destroyed feeding grounds, claimed water sources. Suddenly that 20-mile daily walk became 30, then 40. The energy budget collapsed. Giants starved in slow motion. Being large meant you couldn't hide, Johnson continues. Couldn't change diet quickly, couldn't breed fast enough to offset losses. Every advantage of size became a disadvantage when humans appeared. The fossil record shows the pattern. During previous extinctions, large and small species died equally, but the human-caused extinctions targeted size with sniper precision. Anything over 100 pounds faced exponentially higher extinction risk. Over 1,000 pounds, virtual death sentence. Take the giant beaver. At 300 pounds, it built dams that engineering students study today, lodges like fortresses, intelligence comparable to primates. But it took 3 years to reach sexual maturity. Humans could kill 3 generations of regular beavers in that time. Guess which survived? Island species had it worse. On Mediterranean islands, dwarf elephants evolved regularly. Elephants shrunk by limited resources. The smallest stood 3 feet tall. You'd think being small would save them. Wrong. They still had elephant reproduction rates. Still took years to mat. Size shrank, but biology didn't adjust fast enough. Evolution works on deep time, explains paleontologist Dr. Victoria Herridge. Species adapt over thousands of generations. Humans change the rules in 1 generation. Evolution couldn't keep pace. The cruelest irony. Many giants were already adapting. Mammoths were developing smaller tusks, less calcium drain, faster maturity. Ground sloths were speeding up, becoming more agile. Cave bears were shifting to more plant-based diets, avoiding competition. Too little, too late. Evolution measures change in millennia. Humans measure it in decades. The few giants that survived tell the story. Elephants made it by being smart and complex societies, long memories, teaching young to fear humans. Rhinos survive through sheer aggression. Anything that charges first, asks questions later, has a chance. Hippos lived in water where humans couldn't follow. But survival came at a cost. Modern elephants reach breeding age faster than mammoths did. Have shorter pregnancies, smaller tusks. We didn't just kill the giants. We edited the survivors, selecting for traits that could coexist with human predation. Every living megafauna is a Holocaust survivor. Johnson states bluntly, they're the ones who adapted to us. The rest are bones in museums. Size once meant safety, strength, dominance. Humans made it mean death. And we're still making that true one elephant at a time. Gibraltar, 28,000 years ago. She doesn't know she's the last. How could she? Her kind have owned this rock for 200,000 years. The sea provides. The caves shelter. Tomorrow will be like yesterday. It always has been. But her band number's only 12, now 3 adult females, 2 males, 7 children, none thriving. They haven't seen others of their kind in 5 winters. The smoke from their fires draws no visitors. Their calls echo off limestone cliffs unanswered. Dr. Clive Finlayson stands in Goram's cave, reading her story in sediment layers. The last Neanderthals weren't primitive stragglers. They were innovators adapting, surviving against impossible odds. They just ran out of time. The evidence is heartbreaking in its humanity. These final Neanderthals developed new technologies, sophisticated hearths, advanced stone tools, even abstract art. Hash marks on the cave wall that might be calendars or counts of days since they'd seen their own kind. She was PR. Obviously born here in this cave. Learned to nap flint where the light was best. Gathered limpets from the same rock pools her grandmother had. The cave walls preserve her handprints smaller than expected, almost delicate. A person, not a specimen. Her DNA, extracted from a wisdom tooth, tells of centuries of inbreeding. Her parents were related. Her grandparents were related. The genetic diversity that once spanned continents had collapsed to a single extended family, copying themselves into extinction. They were suffering mutational meltdown, explains geneticist Dr. Love Dallane. Small populations accumulate harmful mutations, each generation slightly less viable than the last. They didn't die from a single cause. They died from 1,000 tiny cuts. But still, she persisted. Seal bones show sophisticated hunting waiting at haul-out sites, timing kills for maximum efficiency. Pigeon bones indicate they were trapping birds, possibly with nets. Shellfish remains suggest scheduled harvesting letting populations recover. These weren't desperate scavengers but careful resource managers. The charcoal tells darker stories. Burning patterns show they were using fire defensively, creating arrears, signaling, perhaps trying to seem more numerous than they were. One hearth contained burned ibex horn, which creates dense smoke. Smoke signals to no one. Modern humans had arrived in Spain 10,000 years earlier. The archaeological record shows careful avoidance Neanderthals retreating to peripheries, claiming territories humans didn't want. Yet Gibraltar was their last refuge, surrounded by sea on three sides. Nowhere left to retreat. Did she know about modern humans? Almost certainly. Did she understand they were different? The evidence suggests yes. Late Neanderthal sites show borrowed technologies' blade production techniques that appeared first in sapiens sites. They were watching, learning, adapting. It wasn't enough. Her children would have been her greatest fear. Each generation showing more signs of inbreeding dental abnormalities, skeletal asymmetries, lower survival rates. She might have noticed other bands disappearing, might have wondered why her children were different from her childhood memories. The last layers show increasing desperation. Marine resources dominate, they'd exhausted terrestrial prey. Tool production becomes erratic, maintaining quality control requires enough people to preserve knowledge. Hearths grow cold more often. The infrastructure of survival slowly failing. She might have lived completely alone for her final years. Finlayson reflects quietly. The last speaker of her language, the last keeper of 200,000 years of accumulated wisdom, dying with stories no one would ever hear again. The final Neanderthal layers at Goram's cave date to 28,000 years ago. Then nothing, just sterile sand where a species ended. No violence, no drama, just absence. Where once there was presence. Modern humans use the cave 5,000 years later. Their layers full of art, beads, complex tools, conquerors who never met the conquered. Inheritors of an empty continent. Somewhere in Gibraltar, she died looking at the same view tourists photograph today, the last eyes of her species watching Africa shimmer across the water. Knowing perhaps that something fundamental was ending not with a bang, with silence. The last word in a language that took 200,000 years to speak and no one to hear it. Java, Indonesia, 117,000 years ago. The old one remembers when the forest was open, when you could see danger coming. Now, vines strangle everything. The canopy block the sky. His kind were never meant for jungle shadows. They were creatures of open woodland, and the woodland is gone. He is Homo erectus. His species has walked the earth for 1.8 million years, 6 times longer than Homo sapiens has existed. They invented controlled fire, created the first standardized tools, walked out of Africa before anyone else, colonized half the planet. And now on this tropical island, the greatest success story in human evolution is writing its final chapter. Homo erectus was the ultimate survivor, emphasizes paleoanthropologist Dr. Susan Anton. They weathered ice ages, volcanic winters, predators we can't imagine. For them to go extinct required something extraordinary. That something was climate change, but not the kind they'd survived before. Around 120,000 years ago, Java's environment shifted dramatically. Open woodlands transformed into dense rainforest. For a species adapted to long-distance walking and persistence hunting in open terrain, it was like dropping a dolphin in a desert. The final erectus fossils from Angandong tell of desperate adaptation. Cranial capacity slightly increased, perhaps selection for intelligence in challenging times too. Where showing dietary shifts to rainforest resources. But some changes came too slowly for evolution to fix. Their technology, revolutionary 500,000 years ago, had barely changed. The same Achillean hand axes as their ancestors carried out of Africa. Perfect for butchering carcasses in open country. Useless for the fruit-gathering, tree-climbing existence the rainforest demanded. They were trapped by their own success. Anton explains. The same conservative culture that kept them stable for nearly 2 million years prevented rapid adaptation when their world transformed. Meanwhile, 2,000 miles away, their cousins were evolving. Homo sapiens had developed projectile weapons, art, and complex language. Denisovans had spread across Asia with flexible adaptations. Neanderthals dominated Europe with cold-weather specializations. Erectus, the ancient ancestor, was being left behind by its own descendants. The Java populations show increasing isolation, no gene flow from mainland Asia, no cultural innovations arriving from elsewhere. The same tool types repeated endlessly, like a broken record of stone. They were technological fossils before they became actual fossils. Did they encounter man? Modern humans? The timing suggests it's possible. Sapiens were spreading through Southeast Asia around 120,000 years ago, but no archaeological sites show both species together. Perhaps Erectus retreated deeper into unsuitable rainforest. Perhaps contact was brief, violent, decisive. The saddest part is they almost made it, notes archaeologist Dr. Russell Syakon. If they'd survived another 50,000 years, they might have encountered humans willing to preserve them, study them, learn from them. They missed becoming living witnesses to human evolution by a geological eye blink. The last Erectus might not have known they were last. Isolated on Java, they couldn't see their continental cousins had vanished 400,000 years earlier. Couldn't know they were evolution's last experiment in that particular form of humanity. Their end wasn't dramatic. No asteroid, no plague. Just a species perfectly adapted to a world that no longer existed, changing too slowly, for a world transforming too fast. The rainforest that challenged them still grows over their bones. Green shadows covering the last chapter of humanity's longest success story. 2 million years of survival for nothing. The greatest survival. Either in human history, defeated not by weakness, but by the inability to imagine being different. Evolution's cruelest lesson. Sometimes perfect adaptation becomes a perfect trap. Morocco, 300,000 years ago. At Jebel Erhoud, something unprecedented is happening. The humans living here look almost modern, flat faces, rounder skulls, smaller teeth. But it's what's happening inside those rounder skulls that will change everything. They're thinking differently. Africa was humanity's ultimate laboratory, explains paleoanthropologist Dr. Chris Stringer. While other continents harbored single human species perfectly adapted to local conditions, Africa churned out variation after variation. We weren't the best at anything. We were adequate at everything. The numbers tell the story. Neanderthals occupied Europe and Western Asia, a respectable range. Denisovans spread across Eastern Asia. Erectus claimed Indonesia. But Homo sapiens in Africa faced environments from Sahara to rainforest, mountain to coast-forcing adaptations no other species needed. That environmental chaos created cognitive chaos in the best possible way. African sapiens couldn't perfect one survival strategy because the IR environment wouldn't stop changing. Sahara grasslands became desert, forests became savanna, lakes appeared and vanished. Survival required mental flexibility that would have killed specialists. Neanderthals had bigger brains, Stringer notes, but they used them for processing immediate sensory, incredible spatial memory, superhuman strength calculation. Sapiens evolved smaller, weirder brains focused on something else, imagining things that didn't exist. The Saber-toothed tools reveal this cognitive revolution. Unlike Neanderthal tools that remained unchanged for millennia, Sapiens tools show constant experimentation, failed designs, weird innovations, a technological ADHD that created more failures than successes, but the successes accumulated. African genetics tell another story. While Neanderthal populations stayed small and isolated, African sapiens maintained massive interconnected populations. Ideas could spread, innovations could combine. A better spear design from the north could merge with a plant processing technique from the south. Population size might have been our superpower, suggests geneticist Dr. Sarah Tishkoff. Neanderthals had 10,000 individuals maxim. African sapiens had millions. More people means more mutations, more innovations, more chances for genius. But the real advantage was social. African sites show evidence of symbolic behavior, ochre use, beads, possible art 100,000 years before such things appeared elsewhere. These weren't just decorations. They were social signals, group identifiers, ways to recognize allies and enemies at distance. Language likely evolved here, too. The diversity of African environments demanded complex communication. You can't persistence hunt without coordinating. Can't gather efficiently without sharing information. Can't survive seasonal variations without planning. Every challenge drove communication complexity. Neanderthals might have had language. Linguist Dr. Deyu speculates. But African sapiens had gossip, stories, lies, abstract concepts. We didn't just describe the world. We created alternate realities through words. When climate chaos 70,000 years ago nearly exterminated humanity, the famous Saber bottleneck, where we dropped to maybe 10,000 individuals, African adaptability saved us. Coastal populations learned to harvest shellfish. Interior groups developed new hunting strategies. So, Mioni somewhere figured out how to survive and told others. The excavations at Jebel Irhoud continue revealing surprises. Fire-treated tools showing industrial-level production, possible trade goods from hundreds of miles away, evidence of planning that extended beyond seasons to years. These weren't just humans. They were project managers. Every human alive today carries African innovations in their neurons, Stringer concludes. The cognitive toolkit that conquered the planet was forged in African chaos. We didn't evolve to dominate. We evolved to adapt. And adaptation, it turns out, dominates everything. 300,000 years ago, in a Moroccan cave, the future was being born not in muscle or brain size, but in mental flexibility. The ability to imagine tomorrow differently than today. Every other human species perfected their present. Only African sapiens invented the future. And that made all the difference. The skeleton shouldn't exist. Half buried in Ukrainian permafrost, the mammoth shows damage that makes forensic investigators queasy. Not crude butchery surgical dismemberment. Each cut mark tells a story of terrifying efficiency. Someone 15,000 years ago understood anatomy better, rather than some modern butchers. This wasn't survival hunting, whispers Dr. Olena Kamenin, examining cuts that sectioned the mammoth at every joint. This was industrial processing. They had a system. Welcome to prehistoric CSI, where every bone tells a murder story. The forensic revolution in archaeology began when scientists started treating dig sites like crime scenes. Suddenly, tooth marks revealed killer identities. Blood residue on stone tools exposed 20,000-year-old DNA. Microscopic analysis showed exactly which organ each tool touched first. At Schöningen in Germany, horses weren't just killed, they were executed. Spear wounds clustered around the heart and lungs with sniper precision. No wasted throws, no panicked stabbing. The hunters knew exactly where major arteries ran, where bones were thinnest, where death came fastest. These weren't desperate people throwing spears randomly, explains forensic archaeologist Dr. Sabine Godzinski-Windheiser. They were anatomists. Every kill was a dissertation on efficient death, but the most disturbing discoveries come from human remains. A Neanderthal from Shanidar Cave shows healed wounds consistent with attempted murderer spear T, thrust that missed vital organs by inches. Someone tried to kill him. He survived. They lived together afterward. The social dynamics boggle modern minds. Isotope analysis reveals ancient serial killers. At Grandalina, Spain, 800,000-year-old human bones show butchery marks identical to those on animals. Cannibalism, yes, but selective only young individuals processed with the same efficiency as deer. Someone developed a taste for their own kind. We can track individual killers across sites, Kamenin notes. Cutting styles are like signatures. One individual's knife marks appear on victims 50 meters apart, we're tracking prehistoric murder sprees. The killing tools tell their own stories. Microscopic edge damage reveals whether a blade cut hide, meat, bone, or human flesh. Each leaves distinct polish patterns. Some tools specialized in human processing purpose-built murder weapons in an age before metal. At Goes Cave, England, the forensics turn stomach-churning. Human skulls crafted into drinking cups, not ritual objects, but used cups with wear patterns from regular use. The cut marks show practiced technique. Someone made these before many times. Blood protein analysis provides the goriest details. Mammoth blood on spear points expected. Human blood on the same points disturbing. But mixed blood human and mammoth on single tools suggests scenarios archaeologists don't discuss at dinner parties. Every prehistoric site is a crime scene, Gordzinski Windhauser states. We're just very, very late to the investigation. The latest forensic techniques read violence like books. Bone stress patterns reveal whether victims saw death coming, defensive wounds, panic breaks, the skeletal signature of terror. Some kills were ambushes, others executions, a few were torture. Neanderthal site after Neanderthal site shows similar patterns as sapiens arrived. Not invasion evidence, something subtler. Stress markers in children's teeth, malnutrition in nursing mothers. Cortisol signatures in bones suggesting chronic fear. They weren't killed quickly. They were terrorized slowly. The forensic evidence forces uncomfortable questions. Were our ancestors heroes or monsters? Survivors or murderers? The answer, written in blood and bone, across 300,000 years is simple. Yes. Every skeleton in every museum is evidence. Every tool is a potential weapon. Every ancient human was both proud. Predator and prey, killer and victim, detective and criminal, in prehistory's longest murder mystery. We're not investigating ancient history. We're investigating ancient crimes. And the statute of limitations never expires on genocide. The hyenas arrived first, as they always did. Drawn by the copper scent of blood, they circled the mammoth carcass, waiting for the hunters to finish. But these humans weren't leaving. They'd built fires around the kill, posted guards, turned the carcass into a fortress. The message was clear. This meat is ours, all of it.
Welcome to the Pleistocene economy, where calories were currency and violence was venture capital.
Every carcass was a battlefield, explains Dr. Manuel Dominguez Rodrigo, who studies ancient competition. Humans didn't just fight animals. We fought everything that wanted what we had. The evidence is written in tooth marks. Hyena bites overlapping human cut marks. Saber-toothed punctures on human gnawed bones. Bear claws scarring human tool marks layer after layer of damage, each species trying to claim what others killed. Prehistoric crime scenes where everyone was guilty. At Olduvai Gorge, the competition fossilized in real time. A single elephant skeleton shows the sequence. Humans struck first. Taking prime cuts, lions moved in, crushing bones. Humans couldn't, hyenas followed. Scouring scraps, vultures picked remnants. Each species had minutes, maybe hours, before the next competitor arrived. But humans changed the game. We didn't just compete, we monopolized. Fire was our first monopoly tool, Dominguez Rodrigo notes. Other predators feared it. We could hold a carcass indefinitely, extracting every calorie, while competitors watched helplessly. The bone evidence shows escalating warfare. Early sites display sharing different species, feeding peacefully in sequence. Later sites show violence, hyena skulls crushed by human tools, wolf bones in defensive positions around human camps. We weren't just competing, we were eliminating competition. Cave sites tell the darker stories. Denisova caves, layered occupation, Neanderthals, Denisovans, sapiens, cave bears, hyenas shows species constantly evicting each other. Prime real estate changed hands violently. The walls scarred with claw marks, tool marks, desperation marks. Caves were prehistoric Manhattan apartments. Jokes archaeologist Dr. Bence Viola. Everyone wanted them. Nobody wanted to share.
Eviction meant death.
The competition shaped our evolution. Humans developed throwing spears partly to defend carcasses from a distance. Cooperative hunting meant overwhelming force at kill sites. Language allowed coordinating defense strategies. Every human innovation was partly anti-competition, technology. But the strangest evidence comes from processed bones themselves. Cut mark analysis shows humans often took the worst parts: organs, marrow, brains, leaving muscle meat for scavengers. Were we avoiding conflict, or did we discover nutrients others missed? Humans became marrow specialists because it was the only niche available, suggests Dr. Jessica Thompson. Lions took meat. Hyenas crushed bones. We invented tools to access what nobody else could. Competition drove innovation. The bone wars intensified as humans improved. By 50,000 years ago, sites show complete carcass processing nothing left for competitors. Bones burned for fuel after marrow extraction. Hides taken for clothing. Tendons for rope. We weren't just feeding. We were strip mining corpses. Other species adapted or died. European cave bears competing for shelters went extinct. Hyenas outcompeted for carcasses shrank in size and range. Wolves learned to follow humans, eventually becoming dogs. Submit or starve. Those were the options. One cave in Spain preserves the ultimate bone war. Human and hyena remains intermixed, both showing consumption marks mutual cannibalism, each species eating the other during desperate winters. The competition had become so intense that competitors themselves became food. We won the bone wars by changing the rules. Domingos Rodrigo concludes. Other species fought over carcasses. We fought over ecosystems. They competed for meals. We competed for the future. Today's humans buy packaged meat, oblivious to the 300,000-year war that made it possible. Every supermarket represents victory in a competition that killed entire species. We don't fight hyenas for carcasses anymore. We killed all the hyenas. The bone wars are over. We won by ensuring there was nobody left to fight. Monopoly achieved. The tiny handprints barely spanned 3 inches, perfectly preserved on Rouffignac cave ceiling, 13,000 years old. A toddler held aloft by adults, pressing paint-covered palms against stone. The same ritual modern parents perform with kindness. Kindergarten art projects. Except this kindergarten had cave bears for classmates and mammoths for playground equipment. Paleolithic childhood was simultaneously harder and more magical than anything we can imagine, reflects Dr. April Noel, who studies prehistoric children. These kids played next to dire wolves and painted beside adults, creating humanity's first masterpieces. The evidence of ancient childhood hides in surprising places. Miniature tools too small for adult hands, botched flint knapping showing learning curves, tooth marks on bone tools where teething babies gnawed. Every prehistoric site was also a nursery. At Sunghir, Russia, the 28,000-year-old burial breaks hearts across millennia. 2 children aged 10 and 13 buried head-to-head, covered in 10,000 mammoth ivory beads each, requiring an hour to make. Someone spent 10,000 hours, over a year of continuous work, creating their burial goods. The love is palpable. These weren't disposable offspring, Noel emphasizes. The investment in these burials shows children were treasured beyond measure. But childhood was brief. Tooth analysis shows weaning by age 3, earlier than modern hunter-gatherers. By 5, children. N contributed labor. Tiny fingerprints on pottery. Child-sized grinding stones. Miniature spears that weren't toys but training tools. The dangers were unimaginable. A child's skull from Krapina cave shows healed cave bear claw marks. Somehow, a toddler survived a cave bear attack. Someone fought off a 1,500-pound predator to save a child. The healing shows months of care afterward, prehistoric pediatric intensive care. Every child who survived to adulthood was a miracle, notes bioarchaeologist Dr. Kanya Halcrow. Infant mortality approached 50%, yet populations grew. The math only works if families had many children and invested everything in their survival. Cave art reveals playful childhoods despite dangers. At Rufignac, children's finger flutings designs traced in soft clay intermingle with adult mammoth paintings. Kids given space to create alongside masters. In Spain, tiny footprints dance through painted galleries, children literally walking through humanity's first art museums. The toys survive, too. Miniature animals carved from ivory, dolls with articulated limbs, bull roarers that created whirring sounds. One German site yielded a 40,000-year-old puppy-to-cave lionwit, movable jaw. Someone spent hours creating entertainment for children while real cave lions prowled outside. Education started early. Cut marks on bones show children practicing butchery on scraps. Failed tool attempts preserved rather than recycled, letting kids learn from mistakes. Some sites have children's areas with easier raw materials, practice pieces, patient teaching written in stone. Paleolithic children learned by doing, explains Noel. No classrooms, no separation from adult life. They watched births, deaths, hunts, ceremonies, full immersion in humanity. But the most touching evidence comes from disabled children. A boy with severe hydrocephalus, living to age 5 despite a condition that would challenge modern medicine. A girl with spina bifida, carried everywhere, fed carefully, loved completely. These weren't societies that discarded the weak. They fought for every child. Nutritional analysis shows children got the best food. During famines, adult bones show deficiency diseases, while children's bones remain healthy. Parents starved so children could eat. The biological imperative transcending species, continents, millennia. One haunting detail, children's grave. Sometimes contain more goods than adults, as if parents couldn't bear sending them to the afterlife unprepared. Tiny shoes for journeys never taken. Miniature tools for work never done. Food for growth that would never come. We think of Paleolithic life as brutal, Halcrow reflects. But imagine loving a child while saber-toothed cats stalked your camp. Imagine teaching them to nap flint while knowing half wouldn't survive. That takes courage we can't fathom. The small handprints in caves weren't random. They're always at child height, arranged carefully, often outlined with paint blown by adults. These weren't just marks. They were monuments to survival. Declarations that this child, against all odds, made it this far. Each tiny handprint screams across time. I was here. I mattered. Someone loved me enough to lift me up and help me touch eternity. In a world where childhood was measured in months, not years, every handprint was a victory. Every toy, a testament to hope. Every child who lived, a miracle that enabled our existence. We are all descendants of Ice Age children who played with death and won. The field notes are clinical, but Dr. Eric Trinkhouse's hands shake as he writes. Them. Vindija Cave, Croatia, Layer G1. The bone fragment is unmistakably Neanderthal, the distinctive occipital bun, the robust build, but the radiocarbon date reads 28,000 years ago, 4,000 years later than any other Neanderthal remains. If confirmed, he's holding the last Neanderthal, the final member of our sister species, the day humanity became truly alone. That moment when the last non-sapiens human died was the most profound in our history. Trinkhouse reflects. For the first time in 300,000 years, only one human species walked the earth. We became unique by becoming alone. But when was that moment? And who died last? The evidence scatters across continents like a murder mystery with too many suspects. Neanderthals vanished from Europe around 40,000 years ago, except for Gibraltar's holdouts. Denisovans disappeared from the Asian record 30,000 years ago, except maybe Papua, where genetic ghosts suggest later survival. Homo erectus blinked out 110,000 years ago, unless the Flores hobbits were dwarfed descendants. Each claimed, last fossil, gets challenged, redated, reinterpreted. The extinction dates keep moving like goalposts in a game where everyone already lost. We're chasing shadows, admits archaeologist Dr. Jean Zilhau. The last Neanderthal probably died unnoticed in some cave we'll never find. The last Denisovan might have drowned crossing to an island. These weren't grand exits. They were whimpers in the dark. But somewhere, it happened. The last one died. Picture her. Genetics suggest the last Neanderthal was likely female, based on population dynamics, living in Gibraltar's caves, her band shrinking yearly. No responses to her calls across valleys. No smoke from other camps. Just her, and perhaps a few relatives, genetically identical, after centuries of inbreeding. Did she know she was last? Could she conceptualize species extinction? Or did she simply wonder where everyone went? Why babies came rarely and died often? Why the world felt empty despite abundant game? Loneliness might have killed them before biology did, suggests psychologist Dr. Thomas Wynne. Humans need community. Below certain population thresholds, despair might be as lethal as disease. The archaeological record hints at desperate final attempts. Late Neanderthal sites show technological innovation, suddenly experimenting after millennia of stasis. Learning blade production from sapiens, creating jewelry, painting caves. Were they trying to become us, or just trying to survive? The last Denisovan remains even more mysterious. No bones after 30,000 years ago, but genetic evidence suggests later persistence. Melanesian DNA contains Denisovan variants that seem too fresh for ancient admixture. Did they survive on islands until historical times? Are we missing recent fossils or misreading genetic clocks? The last Denisovan might have met modern humans who could write, speculates geneticist Dr. Murray Cox. Imagine being the last of your kind in a world-developing civilization. The loneliness would be crushing. Homo floresiensis lasted longest, surviving until 50,000 years ago on Flores. Their final sites show increasing desperation. Tool miniaturization pushed to limits, dietary breadth expanding to anything edible. The last hobbit might have been barely 3 feet tall, further dwarfed by nutritional stress, watching new giants arrive on boats they couldn't build. But the cruel last might be the Palawans. Controversial remains from Palawan suggest a dwarf human population surviving until 3,000 years ago. If true, they outlasted all other humans. N species by 25,000 years. The last non-sapiens humans dying when Egypt had pyramids. When writing existed, when they could have told their story. We'll never know the last words spoken in Neanderthal, Wynne notes sadly. The last Denisovan dream, the last Erectus memory. Entire ways of being human vanished without witness, except one witness remained. Us. We carry their genes like guilt. Neanderthal DNA helping us fight disease. Denisovan genes letting us breathe mountain air. We're living memorials to the species we replaced. Every human is a graveyard of extinct possibilities. The day we became alone, we became something new. The only human, the only voice, the only choice. No longer one option among many, but the definition of humanity itself. That last death created modern human psychology, Trinkhaus believes. Knowing we're alone in the universe. No cousins, no alternatives, no backup plan. Just us forever asking if we're human enough. Somewhere, the last one died. Unnamed, unmourned by history. Unaware they were ending 2 million years of human diversity. They died, and we became mythmakers with no one to check our stories. They died, and we became the only species that K. Now's it's alone. They died, and we inherited a planet suddenly too large for one kind of human, too small for the guilt of being the only survivors. The day we became alone, we became responsible for defining what human means. We're still trying to figure that out. The morning started like any other at Murray Springs, Arizona, 13,000 years ago. The mammoth family gathered at their favorite watering hole, babies playing in shallows while matriarchs scanned for danger. They didn't scan high enough. On the ridge above, 17 humans waited. Each carried an atlatala spear thrower, the tripled throwing force. Each spear tipped with a Clovis point, fluted for deeper penetration, sharp enough to shave with. They'd waited 3 days for wind direction to favor them. Now, Physics, patience, and prehistoric engineering would meet flesh. In 12 minutes, it was over. 8 mammoths down, 40 tons of meat, enough to feed the band for months. Welcome to the Clovis culture, the most devastatingly efficient hunters in human history. Clovis points were the nuclear weapons of the Pleistocene, states archaeologist Dr. Gary Haynes. Nothing that sophisticated had ever existed. It was like bringing a assault rifle, ease to a world of slingshots. The killing efficiency was mathematical. Clovis sites from Florida to Washington show identical patterns. Entire herds ambushed at water sources, multiple kills, systematic butchering, industrial-scale processing. These weren't subsistence hunters. They were ecological engineers redesigning continents. Murray Springs preserves the evidence in sickening detail. Clovis points still embedded in mammoth vertebrae, cut marks showing coordinated butchering one team per animal specialized tools for specific tasks. The bones stacked afterward, sorted by type, organization that would impress modern factories. They killed more than they could eat. Haynes notes grimly. Some sites show partially butchered carcasses abandoned with meat on bones. When you can kill 8 mammoths before lunch, conservation becomes abstract.
The timing is damning. Clovis culture appears 13,500 years ago, within 1,000 years.
Mammoths extinct, mastodons extinct, giant ground sloths extinct, saber-toothed cats extinct, short-faced bears extinct, dire wolves extinct. The American megafauna, which survived 100,000 years of climate chaos, vanished in a geological one blink. But Clovis had. Hunters were artists as well as killers. Their points represent the pinnacle of stone tool technology, symmetrical, balanced, beautiful. Some made from exotic stones carried hundreds of miles too perfect for mere function. These were statements, brands, declarations of technical superiority. The kill sites tell stories of sophisticated strategy. At Blackwater Draw, New Mexico, mammoths were driven into a Arroyo Natural trap. At Kimswick, Missouri, mastodons were ambushed in spring when pregnant females moved slowly. At Dent, Colorado, juvenile mammoths were targeted easier kills, tender meat. They understood population dynamics. Haynes